off. Yeah. Good morning, councillors and everybody. Thank you. This is our first, well, it's actually not really our first, but it's the first of our starting in our normal work program for the year, our briefing on the funding of the wallaby control within the containment areas. So we've got Amy, not Cameron, Jude and Tom at the end of the table there. So kick it straight over to you guys. Let's get into it.
Well, morena tātou councillors, and for those who are watching on live stream, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Amy Allison. I'm the Director of Strategy and Planning. So just to recap before I hand over to my learned colleagues, this issue was raised pre-Christmas by Councillor Scott, but it is an issue that Councillor Ward and Councillor Scott have been working on and with constituents quite significantly over time. So it was raised in the discussions around the annual plan, and there was a broad agreement before any other decisions are made to brief you. So we will be coming back in March for a decision. We've squeezed this ahead of the next lot of annual plan briefings, primarily because what we are proposing is using currently agreed and consulted on funds. They are already in our baselines but held in reserve. So we contend that it actually has no impact on the annual plan expenditure for the next year, and it is covered within the current provisions. It's just an expansion or a slightly different approach. So that said, I will hand over to Tom and to Jude to introduce themselves, and we'll field questions at the end. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. I'll just introduce myself for those that are watching live stream. I'm Judith Earl-Gillay. I'm in the position of General Manager Catchment Implementation, and I oversee some of the work relating to biosecurity and biodiversity, and hence the wallaby program on the ground is delivered through our biosecurity team. So kia ora.
Kia ora tātou, ko Thomas Scott tokunga. I'm the team leader for regional strategies. My team oversees the development of such things as the Regional Pest Management Plan, Canterbury Biodiversity Strategy, those strategies which sit under the ERP core service. So I'll just kick us off. As Amy has already said, today's briefing is about sequencing a funding decision properly, not about whether or not more wallaby control is needed. Staff and, as Amy has already noted, councillors largely agree that further wallaby control is a positive thing. So there's strong alignment between councillors and staff on this. This is a good news story about shared direction and momentum. What I'll do this morning is walk you through the problem we are facing, what is already in place, and the funding approach which we're recommending to support sustained control of wallabies. The immediate purpose of today's briefing, as Amy has noted, is to prepare you for a decision at your March council meeting. This slide just kind of covers off those matters. So I'll just give you a bit of an outline of the presentation. It's deliberately structured to separate the problem, the delivery system, and the funding choices. We start with the impacts and biological realities, and then clarify the roles of the existing programs for wallaby control, and then move on into what funding is available and what tools are available to us. So the central question we're trying to answer today is, what is the best funding approach to support sustained wallaby containment and control rather than short-term activities? As I'll just repeat, as Amy has noted, during consideration of the annual plan and your workshops towards the end of last year, this matter was raised. The briefing today reflects this and reflects the recognition that current funding settings aren't quite sufficient to deliver to the Wallaby program. Staff agree that increased wallaby control in South Canterbury would deliver both strong biosecurity outcomes for both production and also native biodiversity, and significantly improve the durability and effectiveness of our program. This slide, for those of you who aren't aware, basically covers off what the challenges with wallaby control are, the impacts on production, agriculture, and the impacts on biodiversity. So on the production side, wallabies directly compete with farm stock for pasture, foul pasture through fecal contamination, damage fences, and cause very high losses in forestry at the seedling stage as well. On the biodiversity side, they preferentially browse palatable native and endemic species, change species composition across vegetation layers, and indirectly affect invertebrate and bird communities. They're also particularly difficult to manage. Wallabies are long-lived, they have high reproductive rates, and are highly mobile. Baiting of wallabies is the most effective tool. However, landowner uptake of this is low as it requires destocking of areas. So because of that, shooting has been the main method of control over the past 15 years. So, existing wallaby programs.
Tom, do you want questions throughout it, or would you prefer them at the end?
I think, given we've only got half an hour, it's probably best to have them at the end. Okay. This management plan, which sets out a wallaby containment area. There are two objectives of that: to keep wallaby populations within the containment area at or below level 3 of the Guildford scale, and that's a density scale for wallabies, and to prevent the establishment of breeding populations outside of that area. Environment Canterbury's role in that is to undertake inspections, to assess wallaby levels, and to enforce management requirements. The second program is what's called the National Wallaby Eradication Program, or NEWEP. This was started in 2020 and kicked off with some central government funding. The national program, unlike our program, is focused on eradicating wallabies outside of the containment area. So with a focus on the buffer, so to manage the spread of wallabies, which will in the long term enable us to eradicate those populations within the containment area. This is, as I've said, centrally funded, and Environment Canterbury is a delivery arm of that program. So there's been millions of dollars invested into that by central government into the program over the last 6 years. So with that context in mind, the question for today is, what is the right approach for sustained wallaby containment control? In response to your interests in a targeted rate, START have developed a near-term work program to uplift wallaby control. The focus is on increasing the intensity and reliability of control in areas that have the greatest influence to prevent further spread. This approach aligns with recent expert advice that sustained pressure in key locations is more effective than spreading limited funding thinly across a large area. We've deliberately avoided proposing immediate full containment-wide expansion until delivery models, landowner engagement approaches, and operational capacity have been further tested. So, staff estimate that additional funding requirements to initiate this are $600,000 for the next financial year, and then $1.3 million for the subsequent year. We are recommending a staged funding approach. So for the next 2 financial years, to utilise existing pest management reserves. So these are reserves that we have accumulated over time due to underspend. That's largely due to either delays or logistical delays or weather pressure that have had an impact on our ability to deliver our pest management program over previous years. So effectively, these are rates that we've already received from the community and are sitting in reserve, and we're just proposing to utilise them in the next 2 years in a targeted area. This approach strengthens control in the short term without relying on a targeted rate, preserves flexibility if rate increases become constrained, and keeps open the option of a targeted rate to secure sustainable long-term funding. And it enables the progress of immediate-term action. Just kind of continuing on the costs and benefits of this approach, using reserves allows us to move quickly while simultaneously running a process targeting the long-term plan to introduce a targeted rate, should that be decided on. So that would now enable us the time to engage with the community, to ensure that there's support, and bring it back to you fully formed and well understood. I'll just note that there are some rules set out in our reserves policy around the utilisation of our pest management reserve. There's a minimum required balance of $1 million, and that's to ensure that we have funding available to address incursions of pests. So if for example, gold clam is a current pest issue in the North Island that were to occur in Canterbury, which hopefully it does not, we have funding available to initiate an immediate response. What we're proposing is to use the balance of that reserve. So the proposal would not impact on the required minimum. We agree that a targeted rate is the appropriate long-term tool, but it is our view and our advice that that's best introduced through the long-term plan. Using reserves first allows us to complete detailed program design and costing to introduce a targeted rate, test assumptions, delivery models, and undertake the appropriate engagement required, as I've already talked to. Introducing a targeted rate now is not recommended because we have reserves available to complete some of this work, and we've already taken those rates off our communities for this purpose. A targeted rate is a longer-term tool that requires considerable engagement, long-term community buy-in, and community readiness is variable at this time. So with all that said, the next steps are that we would bring a council paper to you on the 25th of March to seek your approval to access the pest management reserves. This would allow staff to begin the delivery of the uplift in the Wallaby program beginning 1 July 2026. So we could then start early engagement with the community to support the potential introduction of a targeted rate in the next long-term plan. And continue exploring additional sustainable biosecurity funding options to support longer-term program needs. That's more or less it. I'm happy to take questions now.
So I've got a list of Peter, Sarah, Ashley, John, F, Claire, DC, Nettles. So I will start with Peter.
No, oh, wait.
Oh, okay. Sarah, Gerard.
I've changed my question. The program would involve contractors with specialised skills and with guns, I imagine. Is that right?
Kia ora.
Sorry.
We're playing switch on and off. Kia ora. Look, the program's got several facets to it. There's the exploring the potential of extending barriers, so fencing is an option as part of that work. The community engagement in the containment zone around the obligations for landholders around wallaby control is really important, so that's going to be a facet of it. And probably exploring what is it we need to do around the systematic control through that area to reduce populations over time. So there's several facets to that, how that money would be spent. And
if I could just add, also part of this enhancement or boost, because we know that the best time was 10 years ago or yesterday or tomorrow, depending how you like to say that, is also working more closely with DOC. So actually actively working in with their program, and when they're going in for pest incursions. So actually building on our partners' work versus various agencies going in and out. So there's going to be a focus on more consolidated and coordinated approach as well.
The next one was Ashley.
Okay, so I'm going to question and play devil's advocate with the recommendation to use reserves now. While I understand it, I also think in the political environment we're in at the moment, that may end up shooting ourselves or whoever comes after us in the foot when there are rates caps imposed, and I do believe whatever government comes next, there will be some form of rate capping. If we use reserves now, that means we need to raise rates in a year or 2 years' time because it's not in the rates already.
That's not the case. So these are the reserves, the rates we've already, over previous years, rated our communities for, and we've had underspend, and those are held in reserves for pest management. So we're just utilising funds that we've already rated the community for.
If we use those reserves, do we then need to rebuild those reserves in future years?
So our reserves policy only require us to hold a balance of $1 million. This will not impact that.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yes.
Apologies, Chair. Just to add, I think we have taken the money and it through a targeted rate from this rural area for this purpose, and it has built up, and there are very strong concerns and requests for, particularly on Councillor Scott and Councillor Ward, that there needs to be more effort in this area. That was we need to use the money in the manner for which it was rated for, which is that. And absolutely, I think optically not using that money also politically doesn't play well, because we sat on it versus using it, and we accumulated it for a very good reason, because if there is an incursion, obviously we need an amount of money to play our part. But as Tom and Jude has worked through for you, we only are required to have $1 million, and that's the advice obviously of our finance team and my corporate colleagues, that actually this would be good practice.
Thank you. John Faulkner.
Thank you, Tom. Just a question in regards to the on slide 3 and the conflict with landowner tensions. Our Landcare group has just received a funding, or is in the process of getting some funding, to investigate the best method of deer control in the Huronui. And they're cognizant of those tensions. And if anybody's been to the Rotherham pig hunt, you will know that there is that event. There would be the whole wall around here lined with dead animals, and they do quite an effective job, coming from all over the place. So my question is, wallaby control seems to indicate that there's a multiple pronged approach required. Options like sponsoring hunting competitions, bounty, any of these things being considered? and because that engagement with the community is an important component.
Kia ora. I'm probably, we've got staff in South Canterbury who have been over this for a long time and a number of years. I know we have tried to encourage the control of wallaby populations. The hunting, recreational hunting in particular, is an effective tool when population numbers are as high as they are. And that's the current setting. In the future, if we get that population down, it could be an effective control measure. But we're open to exploring all the options, especially as we have to lift engagement with that community. And if that's some of the way we do it, then yeah, I think we can do that.
Supplementary is that bounty issue. I know I'm showing my age, and Peter will probably remember the time of the rabbit wards and getting 50 cents a rabbit tail or something like that. And is a bounty still a potential, or is that now off the cards?
I do know that there hasn't been a preference to use bounties. I don't know enough to say any more than that, apart from it's not seen as encouraging a coordinated and controlled effort.
Okay, I've got Claire.
Thank you. Look, I like to follow on from John, because I've been known to say quite a few times in here that a bounty, short, sharp bounty, that would encourage something would be worthwhile. So just the clarification on the previous slide that you've got up there around using the reserves. So we're roughly circa 2 mil. How many wallabies are we expecting to kill? Because I'm not seeing. I'm seeing that we're spending quite a bit of money developing a program and doing the education bit, and I appreciate that needs to be done. But yeah, I'm just
100,000.
How many wallabies?
100,000.
for 2 mil.
No, well, you asked me for a number.
No. But I mean, this is the thing.
Councillor, we've got individual farmers down there, individual properties, shooting between 400 and 500 a month. That's up to like 4,000 to 5,000 a year on one property. That's John Ralston's property at Blue Cliff Station. Now, if they're doing that, and the next door neighbour's doing nothing, then you get invasion. So what we're saying is we need a coordination, and it's not so much about the numbers initially. And on my 100,000, that was a bit facetious actually saying that, but it's about getting a program in place, which you'll agree with, that everyone buys into. Now, I'm not really keen on spending that money unless they buy into the fact that we have a targeted rate. We shouldn't just go and spend $600,000 on these dudes and then not have any buy into that. But they're at the stage now, and Nick will agree with me, that I think they are ready for a targeted rate. If and when we can get a targeted rate, then we can debt fund some big control with the targeted rate. But at the moment, we're limited to doing anything. DOC are about to spend $500,000 in the Mount Nessing area on their estate. And I went to a workshop where they were trying to encourage their neighbours to do the same thing. Now, that's the sort of cooperation that we need. But we need a mechanism to do that. I'm sorry, Claire.
No, I agree with you, Peter. But
There's quite a list.
But it does seem to be quite a bit of money, unless we're actually going to kill some of these damn things. I mean, I drive down to Wanaka quite frequently and to Twizel, and it's like count the wallabies on the side of the road.
Okay, can I just go? I've got John Sunkall going to say something, and then I've got
shoot in a particular area. All the wallabies do is disappear into the next property and over the hill. So the need for a coordinated clearance is what is required. Spot shooting, yes, it takes numbers out, but it will not take care of the problem because they just push into other areas. So unless you have a complete sweep and a coordinated attempt, you don't achieve lots.
Yeah, and I got it right first time this time.
Got it right. Kia ora. Kia ora, Tom. Thanks for this. Just confirming, so this is just for the containment area, and the NWEP is going to look after outside the containment area. Correct, Judith? Yep.
So this funding is for focus in the containment area. We've had a lot of funding through the national program that is addressing the spread out and reducing population numbers already outside, and also on the in the containment area, but on the buffer edges to stop the spread out. So this work would be focused on delivery in that containment area, some of it around that buffer area, especially if we look at potential for fencing as a physical barrier, and those coordinated works.
Just probably carrying on from Councillor Mackay, regarding, I suppose, spending that amount of money, probably more on looking at the Guildford scale. I mean, we're probably sitting at 3 still, are we?
Do you want to go?
Yes, we are. And I just note that we're at the beginning of reviewing the regional pest management plan, and part of what could be considered through that review is an adjustment to that scale and rules which apply to the containment area.
Yeah. So just wondering if the funding, will lower that level. Probably, and Councillor carrying on from Scott. So I suppose we're going to spend this money before we go out and say you guys should have a targeted rate, because that's, because we're not going to go out there and say we've got money, we might spend it, but you guys have to agree to a targeted rate first. But that's not going to come until the LTP, correct? So, we're going to spend 600. If we agree to this, spend 600,000, and the next for the annual plan, and then in the first year of the LTP, spend 1.3, and then in the year 2 of the LTP, that's when we all want all the South Cantabrians, the people in this red area, to have a targeted rate.
Yeah, yes, that's correct.
Yeah, got you.
I think it's really important. This approach, again, reduces our reserves, and we've already taken the money out of people's pockets for this purpose. But we actually get to show a boost, and we begin also the behavioural change and the demonstration that we are doing something and we want to do more. Using these 2 years of reserves allows us for some level of surety for our discussions with DOC, because we are working in with them. And as you know, just one-off funding or dollops doesn't work well for central government. And it also allows us to demonstrate with the constituents in that area and actually nationally that we are doing something, and on that basis it is worth your while for a targeted rate.
Okay, we started a couple of minutes late, so we'll just go for another 5 minutes, because I've got a couple more people here. So I'll go straight to Nick at the moment, and then we'll go to Nettle.
I'll just adding on to what Yane is concerned about. I've talked to quite a number of farmers in the area, and they are happy sooner rather than later to have a targeted rate, because they want to invest in this program as well, because they have concerns that not everyone's engaged, and not all farmers are actually participating in the program at the moment. So if you control them on one farm and not the next, you're peeing into the wind, excuse the French. So I think they are all on board, and they all have the vision for the future to reduce the numbers.
Kia ora, Nettles.
Thank you. As it's going to be a fair chunk of change that we will be investing in this, I'm going to ask some quite basic questions. Long-term success will not mean eradication. It'll mean management and containment, because Hoppy has jumped the gate and is a prolific breeder, and similar to rabbits, it will be a containment issue. That's the first thing. And over time, is it part of a strategy for the containment area to be squeezed up somewhat so the problem gets more manageable in the long term? And by taking these measures, it will help that community, us front-footing it. We're putting our money where our mouth is, so that then they can almost like partner and help with that as the containment area decreases. Is that correct? Is any of that correct? Thank you.
Yes, in short, that is correct. The focus at the moment is containment on the western side of, and then to move east effectively, so move towards the ocean. But yes, containment is the long-term goal.
Kia ora, Nibbles, thanks for that. Nick Moody.
Thank you. Yeah, a whole bunch of questions. I mean,
Just one.
just one. Wow. I mean, I'm not very supportive of this, and I haven't been from the start. So just feedback to staff that when people present and we listen politely, it doesn't mean we're on board and there's broad consensus. It only means just mean listening politely. There'll be things we all present. So key question, I guess. Not clear on where the funds we're currently talking about, the 2 mil, have come from, because I'm hearing from our South Canterbury councillors that like a targeted rate, and then I'm hearing from Amy that this money was raised from a sort of a targeted rate. But where has this money we're talking about come from more precisely?
So we have a pest management targeted rate, which we rate all of the rural community for. So that's where the reserve has come from. The targeted rate which is being discussed would just be for the containment area. So there's currently a targeted rate for all of the rural constituency, and that's for the pest management rate. And then there's a subsequent one which we're discussing as a future potential.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. And how come we didn't spend the money already? Why have we sat on it and allowed the numbers to expand, and now we need to maybe spend more? Just helpful context. Not an accusation, I'm just curious for the context.
So the answer is we budget for to undertake a certain amount of activities, and because of, I guess, the ebbs and flows of the environment, weather, logistical issues, we have to order poison, fencing materials, those types of things. For some years, we underspend as a result of those things. Because we have a targeted rate for pest control, that underspend then goes to this pest management reserve, in which we hold it over for. So that's accumulated over a long period of time. And that's across all pests, not just wallabies.
Okay, it doesn't really make sense to me, but I'll go on to the next one. I mean, I can understand weather for a season, but not for years. And then it would be useful to see in these kind of reports the opportunity costs. So if we spend this money on these pests here, which have strong advocates around the council table, what's the impact on other rural communities who've also got other pests to deal with? It's sort of putting all our eggs into this one basket, and I'm concerned for fairness across Canterbury that it isn't, we've got the former chair advocating for it, they get the money. Well, I don't understand, it'll be good, who's missing out? And so you'd expect to see that in the decision-making piece, and perhaps we could have that information before we make the decision.
The proposal wouldn't impact on our current programs. So this is in addition to, we wouldn't be taking anything away from other pest management programs. We can come back to you with our decision paper in March with further analysis of those things, though.
And I'll start wrapping up because I'm aware of time and other people waiting. Yeah, it's not impacting on other programs, but other programs will be crying out for a boost as well, whether it's Nasala Tussock or any number of other incursions wanting help in different regions. So I need to know who we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, who's missing out, and picking winners. This doesn't sit well with me. The targeted rate, though, that sounds great, and I'm really on board with that. And that sounds very proactive, and I hope we can get to that point as soon as possible to finish on a positive note. Thank you.
Kia ora, Nick. Thanks for that. And back in the day, myself and Cynthia and also Tom were on developed the pest management plan. And so, I mean, the programs have funding. And then so there was always a sense of having reserves taken, and just in case for things like this. But so, I mean, there is a 1 million, there is going to be a 1 million reserve set aside. And that's for, I mean, when we think about the bovine and other things we had, John, back in the day, with the, we needed to tap into that funding for emergency kind of activity, similar to like emergency management and other things, having a pool. So I mean, our current biodiversity work programs, they have funding allocated every year, and those pest management and through the pest management plan, those things are all covered. Yeah. So in a sense, nothing's missing out. there's always going to be a reserve, and it's built up, and now we need to kind of for something, because if the wallabies get out, if they continue coming in north, you can see what that's already done to areas. We need to make sure we can cover those. Anyway, that's enough from me. Ian.
Well, you were just covering. I was disturbed by Claire's question about how many wallabies are you going to kill, because it's not, as you answered Nettle's questions, it's not about the numbers of wallabies killed. It's about containment in the first instance to stop that spread north and east, north and west, and then it's about how you deal with the wallabies in the containment area, but stopping them, and you can spend an awful lot of money chasing down only a very few wallabies that might spread into the upper Rangitata or places. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that.
So a couple of my questions have been actually answered, because I was looking at page 93 of the annual plan and seeing the targeted reserves, targeted rate reserves there, and I wanted to know, well, is it only that particular area or is it broader? And you've answered that. So the only question for me then is this the greatest issue and challenge that we're facing, and therefore we should be really directing our resources to this right now?
Yeah, kia ora. I think it's really important to realise that Canterbury's received over $13 million of 6 years from the National Programme for Wallaby Eradication. If we don't actually do the work we need in our own containment zone, in time, that'll all be lost. So we've actually got a real responsibility. We currently, over that same period, only rated $3.9 million to deliver work of Wallaby program, which is both outside the containment zone and inside. So this is a funding, if we really want to leverage off the investment by central government on the program, this is our opportunity.
Genevieve? And then to Peter.
No, thank you. I actually agree. This is a good move. Personally, having sat for a few years on pest-free Banks Peninsula, you can see, it is a balancing issue, and requirements and the needs often outweigh different things at different times. But you need to target specifics, and I think having. I didn't even know what the Guildford scale was, but I looked at that and I'm like, well, it actually is a baseline, and it's not like trying to get rid of the last little possum like in Banks Peninsula, which they've been trying to do. I've seen things progress and actually have really good results, and I think this is the best way, because the question and the answers lie in that local community, not actually with us, even though we're the person that needs to make the decision. If it's well coordinated, and it's what the investors, which are the ratepayers in the area, want, then I don't have an issue with it. It's there, it's needed, and so it's not really a question. I just think, I thought I had a question, but I don't, because it's been answered. But I just agree with it, and I've heard these guys on the other side of the room scream and yell for, years, saying it's needed. I just think the yellow shed at Waimati needs to change.
All right.
It needs to...
We're going to finish off with Peter.
Hey, look, thank you, Amy, for pulling this together, and I understand it does get us over that having to consult purpose, but it's a really good issue, and I think there's a really good debate. Is it the worst thing we've got, pest we've got? No, it's not, but it's the worst one we've got that moves around, so we know where the other ones are, the wilding pines are, and I'd say they're our worst pest, but I think this is a good start. There's some competing issues there. This is not straightforward. There is a lot of meat harvesting goes on for pet food and those sorts of things. It's a big recreational thing to be able to shoot wallabies, and if we're successful, we'll piss a few people off, I think. That's my thing. So what it does need is it needs a similar setup to what Rivers liaison committees have, so you have a buy-in from those, and we essentially need to get Doc on one of those liaison committees, because I think what they're doing, it's not, if we can do things that aren't piecemeal, like if we could start at Mount Nessing there, move down to Waimati, if we can keep ORC off our backs about wallabies, and the last few wallabies that they're chasing in ORC are costing like $30 and $40 and $50 and $60,000 per wallaby, because you have to put a person and a dog on the ground to get them. So they're tricky wee beasts. So, but thank you, Tom, Jude, and Amy. Thank you.
Excellent, and thank you, Peter, for bringing this to us. And good to see we've got some information and something to do. So thank you, team. Anything else that you wanted to add before you? Awesome. All right, we'll move on to the next session, which is our workshop on the annual plan 26-27. This is our fourth workshop in the series. We'll just take a few minutes to change everyone over. Okay, team, we'll kick off. We've got this session until 12:30, so there's a lot to get in and get through. Hey, everybody, can we just focus, please? Thank you. All right, well, we'll kick straight off. So we've got Amy and Grant at the end of the table. How would you like to run the session? Do you just want to run it through questions throughout it, or pause it? Okay, questions at the end? Okay. Well, kick it off. We'll hand it over to you.
Kia ora tātou. Hello again. I haven't actually left the table, councillors. But for those joining live stream, ko Amy Allison a hau, kei te rangatira rautaki a hau mahi ana nō reira tēnā tātou katoa. Hi, Amy Allison. I am the Director of Strategy and Planning. And my colleagues will introduce themselves when their time comes. I just want to give a brief overview of this. It's now workshop 5. It is a lot of information around the process of an annual plan and also the financial machinations included. It is a very important democratic process, and it's one that holds us to account. So we briefed you all throughout November and December last year, and where we're getting to at this stage is we will have some requests for you, and we request that the questions to us also are at the end. I want to make some key points before we get into the presentation. One is that, just reminding those of you that are new to this process, we are looking forward to the year 3 of our long-term plan. So we're currently in year 2. So 2 years ago, we consulted extensively on the long-term plan, and thereby the first year of the first annual plan with community. And then we formally consulted again for the current year that we are in, so for year 2. So for those of you who were not here, those were done in the previous triennium, you can have some assurance that the current programs and baselines shouldn't be too far off, because we have run all of those things through this process and worked closely with the community. That said, there will be some movements, but again, this is the year 3, and next year we will again go through a formal long-term plan process. So yet again, we will go back to the community. So we are suggesting that, given that where we are in the process, that some of the we work closely with the community, but it's under the engagement. But that is our proposal, and that is for you to decide. The other thing is that there have been some amendments to baseline expenditure. like some of our other colleagues in other councils, we have run a process with directors and with teams working with finance to go through line by line of expenditure to see, oh, well, we thought we needed that much and actually we don't, or we may need a little more, that, or we need to spread that level of expenditure. That is why, and cast your minds back to one of the first times that we talked to you, in the long-term plan, it was proposed a 17 plus % rates increase, and we have come back to you with a significantly smaller number. So that doesn't happen by accident. So I know councillors are concerned that, that we are not being probic, or that we haven't done a review to see, and to see where or what we could move to reduce expenditure and ensure that it's in the best place. So that said, the step of the process that we're in, and I really acknowledge the amount of information coming towards you. I really appreciate the level of feedback and focus on the draft annual plan. We got over 200 pieces of feedback, and some of them were commentary and some of them were significant, we appreciate that. Please know we have done our utmost to make those changes, and we have provided for future, I'm not sure when we do that, before we haven't already, a breakdown of that feedback and whether or not it was reflected. We have made our best efforts to do so, and we very much appreciate that. This is, at this stage of the game, it is about endorsement of the draft plan. You are not being asked to approve it. This is about what goes out to communities and for us to discuss. So you will be asked in May for approval. So it's not a done deal. It's just about starting the process to talk to the people that we represent to ensure that they are happy. We want to ensure that as much as we can, you are too. So I'll hand over. I probably left out half of the things I was meant to say, but Carmen will fix that. So I hand over to Carmen and Grant.
Morena councillors, Ko Carmen Majaho. I'm the Organisational Performance Manager. And thanks for introducing Amy. So really today it's been a bit of a pause since we last came and spoke to you about the annual plan through the last workshop in December. So we just wanted to take this opportunity to recap where we're at. So I'll talk through how we've got to where we are at now along with Grant. Then I will provide you with a summary of the feedback that we've received from you and the actions we're taking to address as much of that feedback as we can within the timeframes we've got. We'll then provide a bit more information on the engagement approach, and Ross will come and join us at the table to go through that. He will particularly be seeking your guidance at the end on, do we want to hold hearings following the engagement process or not? So that is a key piece of guidance we need from you today. And then we'll just quickly wrap up with where we are, next steps post-adoption of the draft annual plan for engagement with the community. As Amy said, it would be good if we could get through the whole presentation and then open up and have questions, but if there are burning questions along the way, then obviously feel free to ask. So this is a visual just to recap where we are in the process and the key steps that have happened. Based on this, we are largely, by the time we adopt the draft annual plan for engagement with the community, we're actually only halfway through the process. So we have done a lot of work to date, but there is still a lot more to come through the next steps. So particularly the engagement process, if we hold hearings, the deliberations process where final decisions are made, and then the formal adoption of the plan. So I know we have been through a lot in a short period of time, and it probably feels like it's there's been a lot already, but we are halfway through the process by the time you adopt the plan for engagement. So in terms of how the draft annual plan's been developed or been informed, as Amy said, this is built off the back of extensive discussions through the last long-term plan and the last annual plan, and we did consult with the community on both of those plans. This annual plan we're proposing for 26-27 follows on with the work that was agreed through those plans and with what we heard back from the community through those two consultation processes. So when we jump to the start of this actual annual plan process, as Amy said, staff did do internal reviews between July and October last year to relook at the work programs, relook at the budgets, and identify what needed to change, parameters we need to work within for this particular annual plan. So as a result of those processes, the staff identified that there were actually minimal changes required from what we said through the long-term plan for year 3 to what we need to do in this particular annual plan. Doing that process internally allowed us to have those workshops with you in November and December in a very quick fashion, but to make sure we were as prepared as possible for when you finished your induction process, we could quickly get in with you, give you as much information as we could in a short period of time to be able to actually complete the draft annual plan. So at that time, through July and October and through to October, we were also considering whether it is a consultation process is needed or engagement. And we, based on the LGA guidance, that's where we have continually said we believe this is an engagement-only approach for this particular annual plan. Okay, so councillors will hopefully have remember those quickfire but very detailed workshops through November and December. In workshop 1, we went through what's the context we're undertaking this annual plan in, and we also went through the work programs for environmental regulation and protection and community preparedness response to hazards course service. That was quickly followed by the public transport work program workshop, and that's where we went through some of the changes or all the changes that needed to happen within the public transport work program. The third workshop gave councillors a financial overview and went through some risk-based assumptions we needed to decide for the draft annual plan. And then the last workshop we had in December was the indicative high-level budgets, financial information, and what our proposed approach for engagement would be. Hopefully that's all very, very, very familiar, and I won't say anything more on that, but if you do have any questions looking back, I'm happy to answer them. So in terms of how this annual plan was informed, the staff recommendations and the council, the guidance we've received from you is to continue with just minor changes. Any variation from what we said in the long-term plan is minimised, and we can see that with the budgets and the actual draft annual plan for what we said for year 3 of the long-term plan to compared to where we are now, there are minimal changes other than for the public transport work program. That is still our recommendation, and that council has those strategic conversations through the development of the next long-term plan. Obviously, there's a lot happening with the central government reforms and proposals underway, and I know you've talked about them extensively, some of the submissions yesterday, but we still need time to work through how that would impact the organisation, and those conversations are best held through the next long-term plan process. So where we're at is a draft annual plan that has a 2.9% total rates revenue increase. That number is known in the community. That is what the draft annual plan you've received incorporates. We want to continue with that 2.9% so that we can bring the draft annual plan document to you for engagement with the community. That's at the council meeting on the 25th of February. So we really have staff have 1 week left to make any more changes into the annual plan document itself to meet that deadline. As Amy said, that will open it up for engagement with the community. It's not the final decision making. So I'm going to hand over to Grant just to go through, just to recap a little bit more about in those workshops last year, what were the changes that were proposed.
Thanks, Carmen. Kia ora koutou, ko Grant Takuingoa. GM Finance and Assurance, and right here, right now, covering for Giles as well, in an acting capacity, filling Giles in his giant shoes, a big role that he plays as a director. So yes, I'm going to cover the three core services, what's changed and what hasn't. Obviously, there's time to go with the May deliberations and things, but I'm just going to recap those core service changes. So for ERP, first of all, there's no significant changes to programs, service measures or budgets. But there are three areas that we need to watch, and you'll see that three comes up quite a bit across all the core services. But in the case of ERP, we've got the central government reforms, which we're all well aware of. Things will change as that continues to move through. And closely related is the Smart Enabling Regulator initiative as well, with consents and compliance and how those aspects may change with that. And then the review of pest management and the plan, which was just discussed around wallabies, another activity we're doing. So those things will evolve. Moving into CPRH, community preparedness and response to hazards. We do have, again, three things happening here that do present changes for us. So we've got the Tranche 2 funding with the flood protection works that are happening, the funding coming to us from government through MB. And it's fantastic to have that funding and get this work done. It does lead to a few changes and a bit of reprioritisation in terms of our spend and what we're doing. That's all good stuff. We've got Service Measure 19, and you'll remember following year-end 24-25, we had a recommendation from Audit New Zealand to address the Department of Internal Affairs requirement to report more thoroughly on our assets in terms of renewal and the maintenance that's happening. So that's featuring in this core service. And the third thing, perhaps a bit of a newer thing, is any amendments to scheme budgets as a result of river and drainage ratings meetings. And that can actually lead to changes in targeted rates for flood protection work, depending on how things happen there in those meetings. Moving into public transport, there are three changes there as well. Not sure why it's three, but it seems to always work that way. But all part of the fun, I guess, how it adds up. And so you would have heard of routes 1 and 5. Those routes have not been approved by NZTA. If they do get approved in the future, we would need to rate for those. But if those routes were approved post the annual plan being approved, then we'd need to look to reserves because it would be too late to rate for them. So I guess that's the interesting thing about routes 1 and 5. And the removal of road user charges as well, that's deferred to the next financial year. So we don't have to worry about the cost of that in 26-27, which is some good news and alleviates some of the pressure. The last thing is the Rolleston hybrid trial. So we'll have that reviewed in February and March, and the results of that will flow through into the May deliberations. So we'll wait and see on that one. So that's the three core services, and I'll just move into the risk-based assumptions. Now, we talked about these at workshop 3. You might remember the accounting 101 kind of discussion we had about various finance bits and pieces. And there's some drop-in sessions later, so we'll talk about those a bit more for those who want to. But just highlighting the three that have changed in the annual plan. So we've got the average interest rates dropping from 5% to 4%, following the OCR, flatlining at the moment, maybe going the other way, so we need to keep an eye on that. Also, operational and CapEx inflation rates. We just take those rates from the price indices from Burl, so they are slightly decreased, but we'll continue to follow those and pick up any changes through the annual planning process. But that's what they are for now. Last slide. Thanks, Carmen. Yep. So the last slide, you'll probably remember from workshop 4. Mind you, that was pre-Christmas, so we might have forgotten all of us by now. It's a while ago, but what we're doing here is we are taking the start point for rates revenue in 25-26, which is 206 million. And then we're working our way towards what was presented in year 3 for the LTP. And to start with, Amy mentioned that was 17.2%, largely due to public transport initiatives that were featuring in there. Quite an ambitious program that we had, I believe. And following that, we've needed to reduce that level from 17.2 down to what we're now working with, which is 2.9. So a number of those things then backed out again with public transport, those initiatives not taking place, making sure we had a vacancy factor for staff turnover, for example, and other identified savings got us to the 2.9. So that's what we're working with at the moment. And I'll pass back to Carmen.
Okay, thank you, Grant. So I just want to give you a summary of all the feedback we've received from councillors in the last week. So as Amy mentioned, in total there were over 200 individual items. So thank you very much for taking your time to read the draft annual plan so thoroughly and to provide your feedback. We have the requests we've received, we have taken all of them and put them into an Excel spreadsheet and been categorising them into different types of requests, and then what are the actions we can take based on the requests, and then tracking if they've been completed or we're still working through the request, what we're going to do next. So a very thorough picture of what we've been able to do with the feedback. So in sort of reviewing all the feedback, there's a few key themes that have emerged. A lot of them particularly are about readability and transparency for the community. So we are trying to make as many of those changes as possible that we can within the document platform that we have to create the draft annual plan. There's also so I'd sort of say a lot of them I would classify as being minor edits, greater transparency, changing sentences, maybe a little bit of additional content. We will try to do as much as we can in the version that will come back to you for the draft annual plan for adoption for engagement. There's also a number of actions which we are saying are more major changes to it. So they would be where we actually want to completely reorder sections of the document. We want to rewrite certain narratives or redescribe some of the services, or we want to add in new tables and maps. Some of them aren't, they're not actions we can undertake within the next week, but we will do our best to incorporate them into the final draft of the annual plan that will come back for adoption in June. So rest assured, if you don't see your suggested changes in the draft next week, the next version you get next week, we are still working on what we can achieve in the final version of the plan. In addition to that, there's a lot of more questions and asks for information or general comments. So we've been looking at different ways we can help give you more information, and we may provide some more annual plan sort of core service workshops between now and deliberations to help build up the picture for you of the work of the core services. But you will also get through that through other workshops, council and committee meetings anyway. So we were trying to capture really where, other than the existing processes you have, where should we maybe have a few more workshops to give more clarity of the work, the service measures, the outcome measures. We will also pull together another questions and answers document where the questions are really specific and we can actually answer that really quickly in the next couple of weeks. There are a few suggestions that we cannot address through the annual plan and that really should be long-term plan conversations. And so we will capture them. We will use them to inform some of the workshops and discussions through the long-term planning process, but they won't be possible to achieve through this annual plan. And some of those are where there are some suggested changes to service measures or outcome measures or work program changes. we cannot make those changes through this particular annual plan, or we're recommending we don't. It would trigger the need for consultation. So just to reassure you, we are working through your feedback. Do want to thank you for taking the time to reading the document so thoroughly. But we are working to very tight timeframes, doing our best behind the scenes. In terms of what happens next between now and the council meeting on the 25th, We will update as much as we can in the document, the draft annual plan document. Councillors will receive the next version of the document and the paper for the council meeting as part of the wider agenda pack for that council meeting. So you will receive that at the end of next week from the governance team, as you would normally get your council meeting papers. At the meeting, you'll be asked to adopt the draft annual plan for engagement with the community. And as Amy said, that's not the final decision point. That's councillors saying, we agree, we're ready to share this plan with the community and start that engagement process. So there'll be 3 recommendations in the paper that councillors will be asked to work through. So one will be that you approve the plan and adopt it for engagement with the community. The second one will be agreeing to the engagement period, that will start from the 27th of February, so very quickly after the council meeting and run through to the end of March. And then the third one is that you would delegate to the Chief Executive the ability to agree any minor editing changes if something is spotted in those last few days around the council meeting that we could quickly update in the plan itself. So those recommendations will be in the cover paper, and you'll be asked to work through those 3 recommendations. So just sharing this for the new councillors that haven't been through this process before. So that's all I'm going to cover at the moment. Yep.
Thank you, Carmen and Grant. So we will now take. Well, you're welcome to ask us questions. Please look around the chamber. We have as many of the appropriate staff here as possible. We're testing this. It is an impact on their days, but we want to ensure that you have the people that you need here. I would also just remind councillors, just for the sake of consistency, I'm aware that you've got our core services performance report now, whether you've engaged on it or not. That is for discussion on the agenda for discussion next week. And just a reminder that is our it's a retrospective document looking at our performance for the previous quarter, i.e. up to December, and this one is a forward-looking document from July 1 till June 30, 2027. So slightly different, but a lot of the information is the same. And I realise that is actually particularly for the newer accounts, is quite confusing. Hence, we have people here to answer lest those 2 things cross over. Thank you.
Excellent. So I have a couple of people who have got questions. Well, actually quite a few. So who else? I've got Ian, Genevieve, Nick.
Dion. I'm slightly disturbed by the very strong message that we should avoid consultation, and yet we've got a new council that has just come through from an election process where there was a very clear message, certainly to from my constituents, that we curb frivolous expenditure and curb rate rises. And if you add the 2.9% to the budget savings from last year, it's 2.9% on the last year's budgeted expenditure, not the actual expenditure. So 2.9 is actually a 10% increase in expenditure we're budgeting for, not a 2.9 increase. It's 2.9 increase in revenue, not a 2.9% increase in expenditure. It's a 10% increase in expenditure. So I'm not sure we cut the mustard in terms of the way we've reviewed our programs in light of the expectation from our constituents. So I just want to make that point. So I'm coming from a grumpy position from the start. But in terms of ERP, you say there are no significant changes to the ERP work program, but we're operating in a totally different environment in terms of ERP, in terms of planning and things like that. So I see there is a $4 million saving in regulatory framework. No, it's a $3 million saving in regulatory framework or reduction in expenditure. Is that the capitalised cost of planning work that's not being done?
So Grant will jump in. the regulatory framework chunk, just to be clear, is not just planning. It has, yeah. So, and we've talked about this a lot, and I know you understand, Councillor, but for everybody else, in terms of how for the particular planning component, that the decision has been made to fund that by drawing down debt. So a lot of the changes in planning has meant that we have not been able to do the planning that we had planned for, which was around the plan stop provisions, which meant that we did not draw down the debt. However, when you draw down debt, you need to have some money to service that debt. And so the savings area in the planning, in the regulatory framework portion that relates to planning, there has been a saving because we did not draw down the debt. Therefore, we did not need to service the debt. Therefore, we did not need to spend that money. But again, in the regulatory framework pool, it is not all planning.
So the $3 million less expenditure in the regulatory framework in that pie chart from the page before, where I think the long-term plan was predicting a $17 million payout, the cost is down to nearly 14 million. So that difference is the cost of not servicing the debt, which we didn't draw down.
Not servicing the debt is part of it, but it's a reduced spend because we're not expecting to spend as much given the legislative change. And natural capital is about 8 million of the total spend that we have here.
So when we're talking to our the planning, the lack of needing to do planning is saving about $3 million. Yeah.
Next is Genevieve.
I kind of want to say thank you, but I'm not sure. Thanks for the briefing, but yeah, I got a funny feeling in my tummy, which isn't usually good. I guess with regards to the changes and the savings is monetary, yes, but in the particular that you mentioned, Grant, of identified savings other, it's quite a substantial amount of 2.2 million from what I gather here. Yeah, 2.2 million. So rates change. I kind of want to know a little bit more detail about that, because we can save, but we can save in avenues that probably might not sit comfortably with the community. So I just want that teased out just a little bit. It doesn't have to be massive detail, but thank you.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, we're always trying to make savings wherever we can, and I think with the pressured environment that will be coming the next few years, we'll need to get much better at that. But in this case, the 2.2 is largely made up of digital savings, which is looking at what we're spending across our programs and our contracts. So, for example, we might have an annual fee instead of support service fees and things like that, making it a bit cheaper and looking at better applications in what we're doing there. There's also been savings from various realignments that have happened with restructuring across different business units. That's the other component that features there.
So it's not a reprioritisation focus in particular. It's more of a savings with regards to sort of fees or that type of thing.
Yes, more about reduction in spend than it is about moving it around.
Nick?
So it seems like one of the questions or decision points for council is going to be about whether we do consultation or engagement. So my question's around that. If we do the more thorough one, which is called consultation, right? Would people, they come along, they give their feedback, are we actually open to changing things based on that feedback? Because that's my first point as well. If we're, in a year 3 of an LTP and we're not going to change much, which is sort of the trend I'm hearing, fair enough, then we're not just wasting their time and ours by having that more fulsome process. So I'd just like to understand that.
Councillor Moody, are we able to park that question for the next section? So we'll go through the financial piece first, and then you're going to do a presentation on that. And so, so if you park that question, I think it'll be answered maybe in that. Have you got another question? No, so we'll do your section after we get through these questions, if that's okay. The next person was Ashley, and then we've got Claire, and then Peter.
Okay, so Teflon, you might like to be involved in this one. So I want to say, first of all, that I appreciate all the work that's been done. I understand all the work that's been done, and I have long personal experience of the pain of pulling together a document that has 6 million inputs. So I know what you're going through. Having said that, I'm a bit concerned about the message, Carmen, that you've given us, that the major changes of reordering and tables can't go into the draft that goes out for engagement, because the entire purpose of making those suggestions is to make it more readable and more understandable for the people who will be reading it for that engagement. And for me, that's a really crucial point. I understand it takes work. I do understand the difficulty, but at the same time, I just really think it's crucial. It's no good making those changes in the plan that emerges after the engagement if people haven't engaged because they can't understand it. And I know from a point of view of submitting on last year's annual plan as a layperson that I couldn't understand it. So I just submitted on what I wanted anyway, without really figuring out whether it was in there or not, because it just didn't make sense. So I think my first piece of feedback is that making as many of those changes as possible before it goes out for engagement is actually crucial. And I think that there is actually fairly broad alignment in our feedback about that. And I'll just add one more point, and then is that in terms of the timing of material coming to us, so that we can talk among ourselves or ask questions that may prevent us going to sending that feedback, I really, really hope that the agenda for this meeting comes to us on the Friday beforehand, not on the Monday, because many of us factor that weekend into our reading time, and getting stuff on Monday means that we don't read, we don't understand properly, and we're going to have 6 million questions for you in the meeting. So that's my feedback.
Thank you very much for that feedback. It's prompted me maybe to give you a little bit more information. So with those major changes, we have, what we're saying are more major changes, we have looked at a couple of areas within the document that we can target based on that collective feedback. So one of those areas is more fully describing in the earlier sections of the draft annual plan, and it's about page 19, what are the key changes from what we had proposed to do in the long-term plan. So we are going to increase the information and clarity on that page. That's something we can do quite quickly. So we are working through that and trying to describe those changes in a quite visual, simple to understand way. We are also within each core services section trying to make it clear what are the changes alongside what are we investing in. We are looking at if we can add more graphics into the financial table at the back of each core service section that would show in a bar chart format what was the expected spend through the long-term plan for each service and what actually is proposed in this annual plan. So we can't do every single item in the timeframes needed, but we've tried to look at where is the most support for certain pieces of feedback, and that to me was around transparency, clarity of the changes, and so we're targeting certain areas within the document to try and do our best to meet that feedback. So I'll just add one more thing, which is some of this feedback can also be used in the engagement process and how we communicate around the draft annual plan and the work of the council through the engagement process. So even if it's not in the document itself, it can be used in other mechanisms for engagement, and Ross will talk to that shortly.
Claire?
Thank you. I would just add a couple of things, and to be absolutely clear, the advice that we're giving, and you have my word, is not about work avoidance. Or I know these things are all a lot of work. We're just giving our advice, and and equally, after Ross has gone through his presentation, that it is our advice around engagement, which is still quite extensive. But I mean, ultimately, we're here to serve you. So please, it's about what we give advice based on our experience and expertise. But ultimately, it is the decision of the chamber. The other thing, just to reiterate and extend Carmen's point. So the annual plan, as many accountability and corporate documents do, when they go out for either consultation or engagement, that's usually, or our intention is that that is not just it. So there's a supplementary and additional information around there to boil some of these things down. So, and I take your point that they can be quite difficult documents to digest. Equally, through my work, open government, actually, there are the people that do read these documents regularly, as well as the people in this room. The feedback is also when you chop and change, people get quite confused and it can also make it harder to understand. So it's a delicate balance. So, but I need you to know that we are taking on and making as many changes as is possible, and we are absolutely open to that. I would, and just a note, these are things that we're testing with you all. We received over 200 pieces of feedback, but around 120, 130 were only from 3 people. So we also need to balance, balance the views of the chamber.
Can I just ask one question, one comment that Ashley May mentioned, and I raised that point around the timeliness of the agendas yesterday after I think you mentioned it to me. I mentioned it to some of the staff. We will get this on the Friday before. It is a big chunky item for us to digest over a weekend and then a few days and then into the council meeting. Is that the intention?
I've got Stephen is nodding me, and yes, that's the governance team are driving us hard to get these documents to them so they can get them to you. So yes, so Friday is correct. We will have our bit done by Thursday.
Yeah, excellent. So I've still got the list. You want? I'll put you on the list there.
Your briefing this morning, though, are we?
No, it's just just on this part.
Yep. So I've just got one question on finance. I might just flick it in because I don't need to go to the 101. But
okay. All right, then we'll go to Sarah, then Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a spreadsheet person. I just love spreadsheets. And I noticed somebody had a previous councillor had a 2021 LTP spreadsheet, and I'm just wondering is it possible to get a spreadsheet of this one here like that? So it's quite useful to know. I mean, in here is sort of like, it's biodiversity. Yeah, okay. And I see there's wallaby spending here, and that's it's quite handy to know what we're doing, and as the regional council, what activities you're doing. And then I have a question. I'm really an advocate for real-time monitoring of our springs, and that springs at the Rakaia River, Springs and the catchment I'm sort of working on, and then the springs in central Christchurch. And they're all for different reasons, but I'm just wondering whether, a program of real-time monitoring can be set up, and I'm just wondering, where in the spreadsheet could I go to see if that could be already in your expenditure and your long-term plan, and then I don't have to suggest it as a more than it's not a minor thing. It's already there, and where does that stand? Thank you.
Okay, I'll try and answer the first question. So that spreadsheet, when it was provided to councillors, and there's councillors that in the room that were certainly here at the time, was only as I joined the organisation, and I think prior to when Giles joined as the finance director. My understanding is when councillors got that level of detail, it was very confusing, and they did not know what they should do with that information, and that there was so much information in there, it was really hard to make it meaningful information and inform some good discussions. And that's the feedback I recall what staff got at the time, and to lift up the financial information being given to have more meaningful discussions at a governance level. So through the last long-term plan 2024, we did not provide a spreadsheet like that, and we haven't done it since 2021. We did provide information at below the service level at a work stream level, so a next level down, to try and provide more transparency of budgets at the next level down, but certainly not we're getting 400 cost code items.
So it can be accessible to us. I mean, for somebody like myself, this is a treasure. It's really, really helpful for my understanding of our role as a council and what functions we're doing. This is all about function, and I think it's just a wonderful, wonderful understanding.
Sorry, I've just asked the CE just to say something around this, please.
So let me take this offline with the staff. From my perspective, there is a level of operational management here, to be quite frank, which should be on our side of the line. But I want to make sure that we're transparent and provide you assurance. And it's to that extent that I will be asking the staff to provide the assurance. But in terms of the level of detail you're asking for, Councillor, I think that's more appropriate for us on the management side.
Did you have anything else that you wanted to say?
Also about the real-time monitoring.
Kia ora koutou. I think I'm aware that you asked, Councillor Gerard, you asked several questions around groundwater, and I'm arranging for you to meet with some of our staff members who can talk about what monitoring we do in and around groundwater and within Christchurch and beyond. So I think that's probably the best opportunity to talk through, and if other councillors would like to join, please let me know. But I mean, where you would find it is under environmental monitoring and advice, which sits under the environmental regulation and protection. We would not normally go down to that level of detail of saying exactly what is monitoring, but we do is monitored at what place, but we do have records of that, and happy to talk about that. So.
Does it give you the answer you need?
So it wouldn't be an additional item. That's my main thing. It's sort of like I don't need to raise it as an additional expenditure.
I think what is probably best is if when you talk to staff members around what is monitored, then that will give you an idea whether that covers off what you're talking about. Because when someone says monitoring of springs, that's quite a general thing to say. And whereas if you talk to staff members around what is monitored, that will give you an idea as to whether that is what you're thinking about. And then that would be part of a discussion. So.
if there's any gaps, then you do your sort of gap analysis, and then you understand what you're trying to achieve, and then you can bring that back to the council, and then there's a bit of a process around, okay, then get the information, get the advice, that goes to a report, then that has to go to a budget line item eventually. So I think that you're on the right track to getting to that point. So I think thanks for that. Who's next? Claire? No. Peter?
So I've got a couple of questions, one for Amy, actually, but it'll be second, not the first one. But my first one's for Grant, and it's around about the amended assumptions. And so the metrics there in terms of inflation expectations for capital expenditure, do they have their own sort of metrics that use to calculate that?
Yes, they do. They report on that, and we pick it up and use it for CapEx and OpEx, yeah.
I guess then the same applies to public transport.
Yeah, same applies to public transport. That one hasn't changed at this stage, so I didn't put it up here because it wasn't changed.
So the one I'm interested in is the average interest rate applied for fixed and floating, and we have a margin across that's above the OCR for local government.
Sorry, how do you mean? And the margin?
The official cash rate at the moment is 2.25%, and you've got 4% here. So is that the margin? So the question is that the margin?
Not so much the margin, it's more about the local government lending rate that we'd be using. Yeah.
So what is our margin with local government? That's going to move around a bit in the next wee while. I mean, we had what's his name, Brad Olsen here yesterday said that we're sitting at 2.25, but he's probably been ratcheted too far down, and it may sit at 3. Will that, if it goes to 3, will that change those assumptions at all?
Yeah, I'm quite mindful of that because the OCR has flattened out at the moment, but chances are it's going to increase, and inflation's going to go as well at some point. So we'll keep an eye on it, and we may need to adjust it as we head into May deliberations. Yeah, so if we need to adjust it, we will.
Hopefully not. You've got a good number now. Let's see if we can stick with that. And Amy, my question is going back to what Ian was talking about before in terms of the debt-funded borrowing for planning, and so we rate for interest on that, right? So if we don't expend that interest, does it go into general reserves or does it go into debt reduction?
It goes into general reserves.
John Faulkner.
Yeah, thank you. My question is probably neither engagement nor financial, but the first 24 pages and how the wording of them was, and it's a forward-looking document, but that wording read to me as in a historical position of where we were in the past, and with the RMA changes, local body government reforms, the 2 letters submissions that we approved yesterday, it doesn't give me the impression that we are providing to the community evidence of change incorporated into that. All my feedback was focused around that wording, and I wonder why there was a slight acknowledgement of the reforms in front of us, but it was not incorporated into the whole assessment in all the different categories. Why is that?
We are looking at what additional information we can add in around those proposed reforms into the next version to come forward for adoption for engagement. But the work programs that we have stood up are under the legislation at the time. And so we need to strike the right balance between acknowledging and providing transparency on the changing environment we're operating in, but also the legislation that still exists right now. Maybe by the time we get through to the final version of the annual plan, we will substantially rewrite some of that content because some of the legislation will have landed. So we are trying to strike the right balance, acknowledging the changing context we're operating in, but what is the legislation we must operate under now? So we are reviewing your feedback and looking at this document was prepared for the end of December. We're now early February. Can we add a bit more in on that? That's time has moved on, that we reflect that.
And just to add, I absolutely take your point. That a lot of it is where we are now. These documents being accountability documents for the public, yes, they are forward looking, but they also acknowledge where we are right now. And as Carmen has said, the regulations and the legislations that are in place right now. It is really important for any forward looking document in any government sector to be telling the people reading it who we are, how, a little bit of how we got here, because that's where we stand and that's where the rates or taxes go to. So I absolutely take your point. It's not a pure futures thinking, and it's not, but it will be when we, over the coming months, as much as we know in the next couple of months, we will reflect. But given that it is these documents are under, we're also under a legislative framework. We have to say where we are right now. So we'll do our best, and we did take into account your feedback, and we're grateful for it.
Just one question I have on the back of that. In the risk section of the document, wherever that was, then is likely to be legislation introduced in the period from the draft that we go out to the consultation to the time that we have to ratify it and then adopt it. The legislation around the simplifying for local government. Is that being reflected? I'm sorry, I might have missed it. I don't know. Has that been reflected? That's one of the biggest risks to the governance of... Yeah, sorry, I haven't seen it. I was just wondering if that was in the document. Or are we going to make any mention of that?
We will double check for you that the wording is strong enough around that in the risk section.
Because that has implications for potential bids on this council from the mayoral forum who wants to do reorganisations and all of that sort of stuff. So the DIA direction is that regional councils will fund that. That's not sure if that's just been flippant or whether that's been actual real. We haven't had any further direction necessarily from that. So that legislation will be really critical, and that will happen over this period. So, Grant?
Thanks, Chair. I was just thinking, actually, we talk about risk, but maybe it's, like assumptions, like you would for budget.
Risks or assumptions, yeah. So I think it's quite critical to just make it if it's not there. Next I had Megan.
Kia ora. I just have three kind of broad comments. First about process, second about finance, and third about drafting changes, or just drafting. So in terms of the process, I provided quite a detailed line-by-line comments because it was following the page-by-paragraph approach that we were asked to use. And reflecting on that, I really felt that level of analysis actually really worked against me from staying in a governance mindset. And 43 of my 49 points fall into that category. And it's actually only the front-loaded comments that are really important from my perspective. And it made me reflect and go, why did I do that? Like, why did I do that? And I realised I just wanted to be a good girl and do the right thing. But ultimately, moving forward, I just want to keep the comments really quite high level. But I hope all 49 are helpful nonetheless. Finance, the direction of travel, I think this is the way that this is being presented will, and I know this isn't a decision-making forum, and moving forward we'll have that opportunity, but I support the direction of travel, that this is really saying this is going to be a stable continuity, focus on core services, avoid service creep and any new initiatives unless there's actually a real regulatory reason to shift it, like the goal posts actually shift, and we've got new legislation to bring into effect. So that's a good, for me, really good direction that we're setting there. In terms of the drafting changes, I'm really pleased to hear that you're going to modify the what's changed section to make it clearer, because that was quite consistent feedback. For me, we have funding shifts. So if it's changing from a general to a target rate, or an allocation is changing because of savings, I think the story around that's really important. So some type of really, and it might not be in the document itself, it might be in the comms that go with it, that say what's changing, who's paying, who's benefiting, and how is this fair? Clearly framed as risk reduction, so that everybody really understands that we're doing this for future planning cycles. And final comment is, I think that the position on Te Tiriti partnership has been written really well. It's positioned as core business. It's reflected as that in resourcing and decision pathways and measurable delivery. And I really support that. So it's quite well embedded as our core service and not an optional extra. So well done.
Thanks, Megan. Andrea?
Oh, just
Oh.
beforehand. Please don't feel like we didn't appreciate your detailed comments. Part of those instructions, just so everybody knows, rather than I hate it, or I don't like the tone, or this was sloppy, which of course I wouldn't have got that feedback here, but sometimes people feel free to have generalised statements. It is incredibly helpful for us to know this section, this paragraph, or these lines didn't hit the mark, or there's a, and if there is so there will be, eventually part of the process is editing and QA and all of those things. But if there are specific areas you don't like, please do tell us. But equally, don't. And if you want to go, I didn't like this line, or this doesn't make sense, and there happens to be 49, that is absolutely fine. Up to you. But just so you know, in terms of from a governance perspective, it is hugely helpful for us to know exactly which bit you did or did not enjoy. Thank you.
Kia ora. It's a big editing job. And I realize there's a lot of different writers of different sections, possibly, so the tenses can be different. But anyway, I think Grant hit the mark when that presentation with the 3 points of what's changed. We were able to summarize that in 2 pages. And I think, wow, that's really awesome, because it made it pretty clear to me. So I don't know if we can do that in this document, but my question is for going forward, because I know it's too late now, for the long-term plan, can we use more graphics? So, because it's the readership, and I know there's public readership, which would really love graphics, because, young people these days anyway, and also consultants are busy people. So those are probably the 2 people who read this document, right? So I'm just wondering, maybe in the long-term plan, we have a graphic employee somewhere that is good at all this, infographics.
Well, just to respond to that, the objective, which is the document creation platform we have at the moment, is very limited with our ability to put any graphics in it. That's why changing tables even is a major exercise. But we do have a project underway to look at, can we use a new tool in the future? So we have a project team looking at what are the options out there in the market that would give us a better tool, not just for this document, but other purposes across the organisation, to tell the story in a more visual way. So we are investigating what those options are. We have a deadline of having that in place by the end of August, so that we could use it for the next long-term plan.
Excellent. I think Nick, did I see you had your hand up again? Okay, go for it.
Thank you. So just to support the conversation about making the plan more readable at all to our constituents, and It's been well covered, and yeah, just agreeing with everything that's been said, particularly graphics and the governance lens for me is the risk. At a time where we're hearing from central government, people don't know what you guys do in regional council. Where we're hearing, where we're getting less people voting every election in local government. Critical risk. We have a big, very large comms team, huge resource. Obviously, this is one of our key engagement things, the annual plan of our work. We know it's coming a long way out. And so I think it's a wonderful opportunity having this feedback from new councillors who've, come from the community, faced with the document that they can't understand and the community can't. And I really hope we take on the opportunity to take on the feedback. Sounds like we are, and that LTP is going to be the most simple, clear. You can open it, and if you've got 5 minutes, it could be a one pager in the press, and people go, "Oh, that's what's happening." That graphic shows it. We have done that before. 5 years ago, I remember going, "Oh my God!" For the first time ever, I actually know where our money goes as an ECAN employee, and then we just sort of went back to normal and words and yeah. So it's really a weakness and a big risk, and let's get it right. Thanks.
I think we'll move into, thanks Nick for your comments. I think we'll move into the engagement approach proposed.
Kia ora, Chair. Kia ora, councillors. Ko Ross Pringle Takalunga. I won't labour the point too much on these next few slides because there's been quite a bit of discussion that covers the territory that is included in this, and we have touched on it in the past. So suffice to say that we are using this as an opportunity, as you say, Councillor Moody, to raise awareness of the Regional Council's role, the services we deliver, and also to provide that opportunity for the community to give us some feedback on the draft annual plan as it sits. There's also an opportunity in there for the community to give us some feedback on their aspirations long term, which can feed into those longer term planning processes. We're looking to reach right across the region, as has been said. It's a vast region. There's different touch points into the community. We'll be looking to maximise those opportunities where we can, being mindful of use of resources. So the timing is geared towards the legislative requirements. So as you'll be aware, the plan needs to be adopted to set the rates commencing the 1st of July 2026. So what we're looking to do is have the draft plan adopted in time to enable a period of community feedback to then bring that feedback back to you so that you can make your decisions. Tactics are varied. There's a bit mix of print and online, some direct outreach to different sectors of the community, people and organisations with whom we interact and we have contact details for, and of course in yourselves, in your role as councillors, you have contacts, you attend engagements. I note with interest it seems to be very much in the thick of A&P show season. There's quite an abundance of A&P shows, you will be attending any number of different community events, interacting with groups, organisations, and those are all opportunities to learn from those conversations and to bring that information back to the table. The one thing that we did want to talk to you about was around hearings. Traditionally, hearings are a formal process and when we are formally consulting, and that requires the setting of a date. It requires all councillors to be present to hear from submitters when they present in the chamber or online. And the reason for that is so that you need to hear what the people have to say, so that when you come to deliberate, you're considering all of the evidence, all of the information that you have at your disposal. So at this stage, we've got tentative dates booked in, but we really want to test with you today your appetite to have hearings. It's a great opportunity to hear from people, but it is a formal process. So I don't know if that explains it.
Do you want the answer now? I mean,
yes.
Okay. So I think it's just easier if people want to have hearings, put your hand up, and it's not hearings, but probably just formal feedback sessions. They're probably one of my favourite parts of my job, to be quite honest with you. I quite like it. So, it's about listening to the submissions that come from the, so when a person does a submission and it's for the annual plan, they can tick, do I want to be heard or do I not want to be heard? And that's when all of the people come to the end of the table and tell us what they've written.
I guess my
Yeah. So one of the things, I'm ambivalent really. I know people like to come and listen to us, but I think if we're not doing full consultation, it does tend to make a councillor sit around the table and actually focus on those that come here and actually forget about the other 99% of the submissions. So, and you tend to get the same people submitting, largely, generalised here, submitting, and then coming here. And I do think that we tend to focus on them a little bit unevenly. So I'm probably in this situation, I'd say no. But
Peter, you have something, and then we'll get Grant to
Look,
answer.
I think you need to be really careful.
Yes.
I think we need to be really careful here. We're either all in this or not, because if you don't, as you've just said, if you don't if we say we have hearings and 5 people turn up, then the other 11 can't make the decision on the hearings because they weren't there. They didn't hear them. So we're either in or out, and I think it's at your discretion, actually.
I'm going to get to you. Can I just have an answer to Nick's question? He said he can't make an informed decision because he doesn't have the information.
So if memory serves correctly, that was around formal consultation.
Just checking if people came in and we had the consultation and approach and they presented, are we in a position to actually make changes that they are going to be requesting, given that I'm hearing that this annual plan is quite just implementing what we already agreed in the LTP and no significant changes and that kind of thing? I just don't want them to waste their time if we say, well, thanks for your views, but actually we can't really change much. It's just,
The normal process when we're formally consulting is we would develop a consultation document or some form of summary or proposal that would outline options for the community, including a preferred option for the council. So that gives them something to respond to. In this case, what we're doing is we're releasing a draft annual plan, which is the whole suite of work that this organisation does, and we're providing an opportunity for them to give feedback. So you won't get, you'll get some very specific feedback, and ultimately I saw some councillors reacting. When it comes time to make a decision, it's the council's decision on where you go with the feedback you receive, along with all of the evidence that you will have at your disposal to make a decision. The difference between formal consultation and what we're looking or proposing to do in this case is around the formality and the options.
Can I just add something there, please, Chair? Sorry. In terms of,
I've got a lot of people on the same.
I think what I'm hearing you asking, councillor, is how genuine is this engagement with the community? Because how much influence do they actually have? And I think that's exactly what we've been saying along the way, because there is very little change, and council undertook extensive and genuine engagement for the long-term plan and subsequent annual plans, that you've already heard from your community. You've got an annual plan that is largely what the community has already agreed to. And you make a very valid point in terms of if you then open the door and invite a whole lot of feedback, how much influence do they have and how much can they change? And as Ross has said, that is then up to the council, with that caution, if you like, that if you do hear something and the community says, well, we want to change something significant, and you haven't consulted on that particular thing, you then probably need to open that back up if it triggers consultation, back up to consultation. So there is a really fine line between how open you are to what you're hearing and in terms of what you can change. But those are council decisions. And so the more you hear and the more you have the conversation, if you genuinely hear something that you would like to change, at that point we may then go say to council, well, our recommendation, our advice is that you've now triggered consultation and you need to go back out on that. So it wouldn't impact your annual plan, but it could be done in the annual plan year.
Ashley?
Sorry, Ashley. I am very much in favour of having hearings. I'm very much in favour of giving the public every opportunity we can possibly give them to feed back to us. And I think if, as a result of that, some councillors pay more attention to the hearings than to
the written submissions, I think that's an issue for those councillors, and that it's upon all of us to ensure that we give the proper weight to everyone. I think in a time when people are wondering what the hell it is regional councils do and why don't they listen to us and why don't we ever get a chance to talk to them, I think it's very important that we take as many chances as possible. And if they come back with something really significant that would ultimately change this annual plan, but we think that is something we can incorporate in next year's long-term plan, then that's totally valid. I personally feel that we need to build relationships with the community in every possible way. And as somebody who's come here and sat down there and given some of the councillors here a bit of stick at times, to me, as somebody submitting, if we cut short the opportunities for engagement, then we're doing our community a disservice, and ultimately we're doing ourselves a disservice.
Genevieve, and then Megan, and then John.
I just recall at the last LGNZ conference when they said that we need to lead this because we're the closest thing to government that there is. And if the public doesn't get an opportunity to constructively either criticise or give us feedback, it's an opportunity missed. They are constrained as much as we are, and we need to be genuine in our approach. People put a lot of effort into the long-term plan, and if we're unable to deliver aspects of that due to centralisation or at a localised level, the community needs to be able to say how disgruntled they are or how happy they are. And to not give them that approach, I feel, is quite disingenuous. But I also would like to see a little bit more of a risk lens on this, to see if we approach with engagement, what is a missed opportunity we've got? It might cost us more, yes, but have we missed something? This is like a gap analysis of our programs when public come in and actually give us feedback, because we take it all on board, whether it's written, because I do, I read every single one, or it's oral. Either way, it has weight, and government needs to listen to what our community here needs to say. Whether it costs us something, I'm quite happy to negotiate that, and the public, I'm sure, would want their voice said. I'm really conscious of this could be our swan song. It's true. We need to be able to treat this like a genuine court case for the community. It is true, and it really frustrates me when people consider it as just a means of just letting the public know that this is what we decided, because that ain't what I'm sitting with today.
Megan?
So I strongly oppose having a public hearing unless we are moving to formal consultation, and which I don't support, because I said earlier that we're on the right path of saying we're going to keep to core business and we're not going to introduce new items unless there is a strong regulatory reason to do that, or there's some offsetting, because we have to also keep rates down, and we've got major reform coming through that's going to cost us money. The reason I say unless we go to formal consultation is a principles of natural justice for any hearing, regardless of whether it's a criminal case or a local government decision or an RMA decision, that we come to every decision with an open mind so that whoever is presenting to us, we hear them out and we give genuine and real consideration to what they're putting forward. And what I've already declared here is I'm actually not that open to a whole heap of new things, because at this point in time, we need to do business as usual and find ways to actually and really work through the new regulatory framework. So I would feel very uncomfortable going into a non-formal consultation hearing on that basis. That doesn't mean I don't want to hear from the public. I just think it's too high risk to participate in.
Yeah, thank you. I think I agree 100% with what Megan just said. But there's another part of that I see the annual plan, and I referred to it before. And where this falls into the strategy and policy of the council where we're going, because it isn't. I'm not clear in my mind because I see the annual plan that we're doing. We don't go through a consultation process, but embedded in the annual plan, there is a indication of business as usual, steady as we go, as she goes. That is a perception that we can provide to the public, and I think that's a very important part. If we have a full consultation process, it all becomes kind of emotive and disjointed and not professional.
I think we'll move on from this this slide. We're not going to get a resolution on this right now. So, how much more have you got into this presentation?
That's effectively it. Apart from the next steps.
I'll get to the end of the presentation. We've got more time for questions.
So just recapping, and we've already been through this, the next steps are the meeting on the 25th of February when you will consider adopting that draft annual plan for the community to engage on. 27th of February is when it will start. So we're trying to do that as quickly as possible after that decision. Then we've got those hearings scheduled pending that discussion, the outcome of that discussion. We have set aside some time just in case we need it. And then the deliberations will occur in May. That's the timeline.
Now we'll go to Andrea.
I'm just wondering if there's a hybrid here, because I think Sarah, Ashley, and I, and Genevieve, and even Dion, we like going out into the public and hearing. So maybe there's a hybrid way. Can those of us who want to go out, can we just have meetings? No.
I mean, we can do our own consultation the way we want to do through the consultation. This is around formally getting people to come in and have that. And to Peter's point, we are either all in or all out. So there is that. And I do take that point seriously. So I think we're not probably going to get a resolution to that right now. We'll have to have another chat.
Sorry, Chair, because we do need that guidance from you today, because we need to put that provision into the submission form when we go out for consultation. Yeah, sorry, engagement. Thank you, Carmen.
We're not going to get it. We're not going to get it. As Peter said, we're all in or all out. And at this stage, it's not all in. So we'll have a chat over the lunch break, and we'll come back to you, and we'll get this by the end of the day. Just, any other questions on this? We've got a couple more minutes before the end of this session. Sarah first, and then Ashley.
Through you, Chair. So from my understanding of reading the annual plan, the environment schools where they, it's not actually very clear where that where they're going to be allocated and how they're going to be funded. So, in our engagement, would there be a program to let Enviro schools know how their funding is going to be and how? Yeah, because it's not clear, and there'll be a stakeholder that we'll engage with.
Short answer is yes. They are a stakeholder and are aware of how we fund them. They are for council's benefit, there's about a $5.60 UAGC per property per year that funds those. So for your information, that's how they're funded. They're aware of the funding and the fact that it's contestable funding through the council's process in terms of, bearing in mind we employ the staff, so it's an in-house function. It sits across all three of the core services, so it's not something that we normally pull out separately, but from our point of view, we work with them obviously all of the time, so they're aware of the process behind the scenes. Yeah.
Ashley?
Just anticipating the way the hearing versus non-hearing may go. If we don't have hearings, I'm really keen that our engagement methods and materials are as diverse and as open as possible. So one of the issues that I've found as someone wanting to make submissions, and I've raised this in this chamber as someone sitting down there, is that too often the engagement forms are so directive that there is no question saying, is there anything else you'd like to say? And I think it's absolutely essential that we have is there anything else you'd like to say? Some of it may be complete rubbish, some of it may be gold, and I'll leave you to decide which is which. But the other thing that I've found as somebody submitting is I don't fit into forms very well. And so I usually want to email my submission in, and finding out where to email it sometimes is not particularly easy. So again, in our engagement material, I would very much like to see every possible way people can feed in made as prominent as possible, so that if I'm someone who likes to write a missive and then format it nicely and send it in, I don't have to go hunting for that email address or whatever else.
Megan?
Sorry. I was just going to reassure you that we do have that question that you allude to. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us? So I can offer you that reassurance.
So in my last gig, we decided not to go out for full consultation on the annual plan, but we ran drop-in sessions nonetheless of information of this is the work that council were doing, where councillors could go along to and engage with the public. It was a presentation. Is that, do we do that here, or is that possible?
I mean, it's certainly possible. And just to be really clear, we're not suggesting by doing engagement rather than consultation that there's any less communication or conversations. I mean, we absolutely encourage all councillors to be out where the people are in your constituencies having those conversations, and our job is to help enable that for you. So if you need different material to hand out, or there are different ways that you want to engage, one thing we have found, we have previously tried drop-ins, often have more staff and councillors than members of the community. So we have had feedback from previous councils that it is better when you are going there to the people rather than expecting the people to come to you in a particular drop-in. So that's just been our previous experience, but that doesn't mean that if that's something that you would like some assistance standing up, we can certainly help with that. But it's just we haven't had a great experience with that. One of the ways that has worked a little bit better for constituent councillors is jumping in with your TA equivalents. So when you're talking to the local communities, you're actually going in alongside the TAs as well. Yeah, but there are various different things that we can talk to you about that we can certainly help with. But we're definitely not suggesting that we do less engagement. It's just the formal side of it. And if I may just quickly, Chair, to Councillor Campbell's point, when we consult under the LGA, we have to give options. We have to price those up. We have to say who pays and who will benefit, and we have to put a preferred option from council. So they are a little bit more of a black and white. Do you want this one or this one or this one? When we're engaging, it can be as open as we want it to be. So as Ross said, it will be a much more tell us what you think. Anything is information for us. Yeah.
Ian.
Just a comment on Megan's comments. I take it when you said we, you were talking about your role with the Selwyn District Council.
I see my basket.
Yeah. At the local body elections, I can tell you that at all the meet the candidates meetings, that was a very unpopular decision by the Selwyn District Council and probably cost the mayor his job, not consulting on their last plan.
Anyway, we're Ian. I kind of want to come back to that consultation, hearing, non-hearing thing. I think we just need to go around the room and see who's keen to do that and who's keen to do it not.
How much time
We don't know how many are going. Well, Joe's not here, and we need to make a call. So we actually do need to make a call here. So No, it's just days, and it depends on how many people turn up. It could be 1 day, could be 2 days, could be 3 days, but probably not.
Okay, so that's great.
Yes.
It was 2 weeks. Who knows?
Yeah. So John, yes or no? Nick, it's clear. Okay. Ian.
I'd turn up if we had hearings. Yeah, I guess my view is that we are limiting the discussion, and that doesn't sit well with me.
John.
No.
I would have to consider whether I'm actually conflicted in any event, because I've already kind of declared where I think the travel of direction is, so I probably would be conflicted out of even attending a hearing, but I'd need to consider that. But I'm a no, nonetheless.
The record show that I entirely agree with Ian.
Yeah. Genevieve. Yeah. Nick.
Well, yeah, if it's a couple of days.
I actually think there's more that just said yes than there is no. So
then I'm a yes.
So we're going to do a yes. I forgot to ask Yayan.
I'm a no.
Okay, and then Lamont. Nettles.
Oh,
She is there listening or not. So, is there another way of doing it rather than calling it hearings?
Should we also as staff go and have a look at and see what a potential hybrid option is?
Yes.
And whether there is something that isn't the formal route,
Yep.
that therefore wouldn't exclude anybody being involved in deliberations if they weren't in the hearings space, and just seeing how potentially, picking up on your point, Megan, about whether there's a drop-in type arrangement within council, so people can book in, come in, be heard, but not necessarily hearings, or you can be hearing from them out there in the constituent space, which I think is as valuable. And so, yeah, we can perhaps have a look at that and see if there's a way that we can meet both sides of the table's needs and the community's needs. Does that work, councillors?
I think that's sensible. What's that? Sorry. Well, there's more people that said no, so that's where we're at. All right. Can't get a hold of Nettles.
What did you say?
I said yes. So that's where we're at. We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, team, for for bringing this presentation to us. And if you we'll leave it there. Thank you. And I'll start again. Are we live now, are we? Okay, we've got our final briefing for the day, flood infrastructure projects. We have Lee Griffith will most likely come to the table, and Dr. Tim Davey, who is turbocharging into the room, so and then Sean McCracken as well. So I'll leave it over to you guys. How do you want to run the presentation? Would you like questions throughout it, or would you prefer to run through the presentation and stop and take questions at particular times? At the end? Okay, excellent. Over to you.
Apologies for lateness. I'm standing in for Brett, who is otherwise engaged, but this is to give you an overview of, you'll be familiar with the term RIF, is it Regional Infrastructure Fund, central government funding that we've received 2 tranches of, and we're in the process of applying or trying to get some work together for the 3rd tranche. And this is to talk through the infrastructure projects that have come from this, and I think some other funding as well. So I'm going to hand straight on to Lee and Sean, but I'm here.
Yeah, have a breath.
Good advice. Thank you, Tim. Tim's covered that quite well. So this obviously sits well within the hazards core service, and it's all within our 30-year infrastructure strategy or projects you've heard about before. There's a whole bunch of things we're not going to cover today, and I just want, to reiterate the message that what you're going to see is not all of what's happening. So we have approximately 300 jobs either on the go, actively in the field, or in planning. And we're not going to cover any of our maintenance activities, which is critical to our existing $850 million worth of assets. And we've sort of chosen a regional spread of 8 to 10 projects, noting there are a whole bunch more from the value of $10,000 to a couple of $100,000 that are also really important, but we couldn't put everything in here. So I've just said what we're not going to cover, but we are going to cover the majority of our co-investment works that have luckily been funded through the Regional Infrastructure Fund, touch on some future work that we also hope to get some central government support with, as well as other significant projects in our 30-year infrastructure strategy.
Kia ora. For those who haven't met me yet, Sean McCracken, I'm the Chief Engineer in our Rivers section. So what I'm going to do is just take you through some of these projects in a little bit more detail. And I think we will run through them all, and then if you've got questions on any of them, we'll come back to that at the end. So the first one, just as a summary, Lee referred to the Regional Infrastructure Fund. There's 3 tranches, 1, 2 and 3. 1's underway, well underway. 2, the contracts are just being signed currently, and 3 is sort of future work. So we'll cover those the ones which are underway first under tranche 1, one down at Waitariko, one on the Rangitata, and some region-wide structure upgrades. So the first one at Waitariko, I guess the big picture here is there's coastal retreat all along the South Canterbury coast, which is affecting the both the coastal environment, the coastal ecosystem, and the coastal dune, both natural and man-made stop bank, which is protecting the inland areas from saltwater inundation. So this project is looking to ultimately relocate the drain and the stop bank further inward and retreat in there. So it's well underway. There's been some initial site works undertaken last summer, and the next phase of works is looking at, in the middle of the image there, refers to a culvert installation on Aorangi Road. So that's a reasonably large culvert to allow the retreated sea-down drain to flow under the road. So that will go in first, be put in the dry, and then the third phase is the realignment of the waterway itself. Yep, I think that's good for that one. Oops. The next one I'll highlight is on the Rangitata River. So there has been a lot of work undertaken in the main stem of the river already. Lots of vegetation clearance, weed clearance, and some minor works on the sides of the rivers. But the substantive work is currently out for tender, and the substantive work is what's indicated in this image. That sort of blue-coloured line is some stop banks on the side of the south branch of the Rangitata. So this image was taken in 2019, which was the last time we had significant flows down the south branch, and the outcome that we're trying to remedy here, as you can see, within those flows coming down the south branch, there's water which is flowing further south through that longer of the blue lines, and that ends up going across the highway, across the railway, and through the Rangitata community down there. So the intent of this work is to control that, direct as much water as is feasible under the South Branch Bridge, and keep the water flowing down through there.
I let you know that I was going to talk about the Rangitata, but one of the things that was identified as the Arundel Bridge and the work that was going to be done at Arundel, because the river gets out above Arundel and then runs down and then threatens a bit of that infrastructure south Rangitata. My understanding from the meeting that we had down at Ealing was that there's a real problem with that bridge, and that bridge forms a barrier. It's not an NZTA bridge, it's a Ashburton District Council bridge and Timaru District Council bridge. So the logistics of actually getting what I might roughly call a bulletproof system for the Rangitata River is predicated on actually somewhere along the line the next few years doing that bridge. My point being is that I know we're getting maintenance work from this, but I would really like to see us start a conversation with central government about capital to do some of these larger projects that have long run life. I don't know if we should ask that question at the moment, but I think that's one of the things that we need to do. And I understand from all our river meetings were good, and I think, and I've said to you about how well Sam did at those meetings, so you can pass that on to Sam. But I think we need to have that conversation if we want to get that resilience level up, especially in down in our area. So that we can park that up. I don't want to interfere with what you're saying here, Sean, but we can park that up for another day.
Just wanted to remind us that we're having the questions at the end. So park all of the questions, but then we'll use the statements at the end. Thank you. It was a speech. It was a sermon.
Okay, no, that's good, and I guess I'll just flesh that out, and then we can move on from it. So when this Rangitata Tranche 1 project was initiated, there was an initial intent that some work would be possible up at the upstream end of the river around the Arundel Bridge. As we got into the detailed design, it became quickly evident that the waterway capacity through the bridge was a constraining feature. We worked with Timaru District and Ashburton District Council staff to work with them to see if there was any movement possible within the bridge, and within their current constraints there wasn't. So what we've done is pivoted down to this area to keep the project moving, knowing that this needed to be done as well. And the next stage is to come back up, and we're working with Rangitata South Irrigation Limited and the district councils to undertake a feasibility study into what could be done in that upstream area. So that will start that process, Peter. The third project, we called it region-wide structure upgrades. It was really a project to enable us to spread some of the funding throughout the region and undertake some of the upgrade works that had been deferred due to funding prior to this. So we've highlighted a few on the slide there. I won't read through the whole lot. The guts of it is, in these two photos here, this is really typical of the type of work that we're undertaking through this program. We're getting to assets like this one on the Cam River. That's a stop bank there on the left-hand side that the person's standing on, that had become overwhelmed with trees and tree roots over time. And so really stripping it right back, pulling all those trees and tree roots out of it and rebuilding the stop bank so that it's fit for purpose. And that's being replicated through the region. So tranche 2 are the current suite of projects that are either just starting, just getting underway, or being kicked off with the current round of investment from the government. Again, we've got a big list there, and as Lee said, we're not going to, in total, 40 individual work streams that are going to fill this package of work. I think Lee's going to cover this one.
Just to highlight the national project, which is something that all 16 councils around are contributing to. So this is got 3 main work streams. One of them's linked to flood warning and telemetry upgrades. There's some other work around national rain radar, and a work stream around building a flood resilience platform, which is a one-stop viewer or database that would have all New Zealand flood protection assets in it, risk profile, a whole bunch of information around social demographics and other things, which will enable national prioritisation decisions for co-investment in the future. So this is something that we currently do as a national collation on spreadsheets and things. This would enable it to all be in one place and to be used for multi-purposes. So it is a national project, but Environment Canterbury does hold the contract, so we do have a lead role here, and this is where our telemetry program sits for the RIF of 2.5 million of the improvements we're making to our flow and rainfall, etc. sites. So just to highlight, this one is going on, and we will bring back a bit more detail on the platform once it's a bit further scoped.
Okay, just to highlight a couple of the bigger physical works projects that are underway at the moment. So this first one up in Kaikoura, the project here is essentially rebuilding, replenishing the emergency stockpiles of rock for scour protection up in the district. The historic methodology has been mining the rocks, large rocks from the riverbed, and this project is bringing the rocks in from a quarried source outside of the district into these stockpiles, ready for the rainy day. Courtenay floodgate, effectively some culverts running through it with some big floodgates on them that are closed in times of flood to stop water flowing back upstream. That structure is at end of life. It had a bit of a maintenance go after the Canterbury earthquake sequence, but it's now time to replace it completely. So that project has been put out to tender and awarded to a local construction company, G&T Construction. The initial site works are underway. Significant works will be starting next month and due for completion in October this year. Kairaki Stop Bank and the Beach Road floodgate. So this is both of these on Kairaki Creek, right down near the mouth of the Waimakariri. So two separate projects here. I'll start with the Beach Road floodgate. You can see Beach Road labelled there. There's a similar structure to the Courtenay floodgate, which is under the Beach Road bridge at the moment. Again, that's at end of life, needs to be replaced. The intent here is once the Kairaki floodgate project is finished, we'll roll on essentially with the same template for the installation being installed on Kairaki Creek here. And then the other part to bring your attention to is we've identified there's a lower section of stop bank right down near the confluence of Kairaki Creek and the Waimakariri. This is actually on Waimakere District Council land, so we've been in touch with staff and councillors at the District Council to discuss this issue as well. The subtlety here is that some of the private property parcels adjacent to it have extended their occupation into the District Council land, which are in turn extending into the existing stop bank footprint. So there's a couple of delicate conversations to have with 2 or 3 landowners there about how that might look in the future. So the purpose of today is just to bring that to your attention, that in the next couple of months those conversations will be initiated. The Pariora, the reason for bringing this one to your attention is because this is typical of a number of schemes that we're taking this approach to. We've got either older flood models or anecdotal evidence that the river scheme capacity is low in places. So what we've done is updated using the most recent LIDAR and new flood models, our expectation of flood extent within the flood protection scheme down these schemes. What that does is highlights areas of stop bank which are either too low or within the freeboard allowance that we can then follow up and top up to ensure that we're meeting the scheme design standard. So the Pariora is one of those. The model has been completed and we're scoping the physical works at the moment. This one on the north branch of the Ashburton, this is actually largely outside of the Regional Infrastructure Fund co-investment. That being said, there is a small amount which we're aligning to this project. The site is within the Ashburton River Rating District. Many of you would have been for a visit to this site in past years. The project here has picked up a section of the river which is the narrowest part of the river, and we're looking to retreat the stop bank and create more room for the river, more flood capacity and more resilience. It'll also incorporate a wider vegetated berm area, wider space for both gravel extraction and gravel processing in this zone of the river, which is in a grading reach of the river. So the stage that this one's at, we've completed the land purchase for the majority of the work. We're in the final stages of compensation agreements for the other parts of land that we need to work on. The detailed design is most of the way there. The resource consent applications are in. We're still in conversation with the local Green Street community. We haven't resolved 100% of their questions, so that's still being done. So that's the reference to the likely community meeting either later this month or early next month. And I think this is the final one that we've got. Big project on the Ashley River. So within the long-term plan, we initiated a project over 8 years with an estimated cost of $15 million over that 8-year timeframe. I will highlight that estimated cost and timeframe I put together about 4 years ago now, before we entered into the detailed or any sort of conceptual design stage, as an indication of time and cost that this project is likely to be at. The intent of this project is taking the Ashley River Flood Protection Scheme, which has an approximate level of service of about 100 years, average recurrence interval in terms of the flood standard currently, and we want to be able to lift that to provide a level of protection somewhere between 200 and 500 years for the Greater Waimakere District. So that number is being determined in consultation with Waimakere District Council staff and councillors as well, so that we ensure that we're aligned with all their district plan. So the stage that we're at with that one at the moment is a lot of consultation with the District Council and Whitiora for Tuahuriri has been undertaken as an initial kick-off for the project. We've done a reasonable amount of options design to identify possible options of where improvements could be made, and we're imminently about to start the public communications campaign to start sharing some of that information. The purpose of bringing this to your attention today is to highlight that some of these options include secondary stop banking systems, similar to what we have on the Waimakariri River scheme. And if we were to proceed with one or some of the options that are being proposed for the secondary systems, there will be some private property currently located riverside of those proposed alignments, which would receive more floodwater in these rare but consequential events. So there's some sensitivity around how we communicate that, both immediately and then as we progress through more detail through this project. So the purpose of today is to bring that to your attention, make sure you're aware of those conversations being initiated, and if you are to receive any questions or concerns from the community, to bring them back to our team so that we can ensure that they're getting the correct information. Final two slides. I've focused on effectively hard infrastructure in the previous slide set. I don't want to leave you with the impression that that's all we do. We've got each one of these projects is scoped with nature-based solutions, green infrastructure, in ecosystem services, recreation, everything in mind. So these final two slides are just a demonstration of that from our Braided River Revival team. This one in the Ashburton catchment, just showing how planting of native species within the exotic species can provide shelter, and they really thrive. And similarly, by working with clearing out some of the really invasive portions of the exotic species in the riverbed, and deliberately planting and maintaining those native plants, you can get a really good result. So this one's down near Lake Hood.
Should I take some questions just on that? Because that's just kind of the work that's immediately coming up. There's a whole lot of people that have asked questions. Is that all right? And then we'll...
Observation. Can you just go back to the North Ashburton one you had before? So just to remind you, this is where we went on the field trip. So the farm that you can see above that A was there's that large shingle stockpile that we walked beside, and then we walked out to the river. So was that November? I can't remember when we went, but just to orient yourself that's where we were.
Okay, so John.
Thank you. I've got three questions. One is just to update on where the telemetry on the rivers are, how many sites there are. And the other one, second question, was Kaikoura rock purchase. When I attended the rating meeting up there, I was quite surprised to hear that they were coming across to Mouse Point to get rock. That issue's... is there any chance of getting that issue resolved so that there is Kaikoura rock available, or is it just going to be an ongoing problem that's occurred from the earthquake? And third question is the gravel extraction policy. Does it create a barrier to flood protection in regards to individual landowners being able to do their own work?
I'll start with the telemetry question. And the simple answer is I can't give you exact numbers off the top of my head, but it is around about 180 flow site or water level sites and rivers, and about 80 to 100 rain gauges. I just can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. What I would say is that not all of them are flood warning sites. So some of those are used for minimum flow sites and irrigation and some of those things as well, or they'll be combined. They're a mixture of the two. The work that's been done that is highlighted here under the regional infrastructure funding and other funding that we're using of our own to upgrade that network is around resilience of that network. So that's about things like making sure that the sites don't get washed away in a large flood, that there is resilience of the telemetry, so there's multiple ways that we're getting the data back, whether it be over radio or telephone networks or whatever it might be, and other parts. So it's upgrading the network, and that's rainfall as well as the flow.
Okay, I'll cover the Kaikoura Rock. We, prior to committing to this contract, our first protocol was to undertake a detailed feasibility study to see if we could establish a new quarry in the Kaikoura district. And the short answer is, for the volume of rock that we require, which is relatively small on a large quarry scale, it doesn't stack up. There's no easily accessible, consentable locations to create a quarry for large rock. So then we put this out to tender for operators to either supply and deliver rock from a quarry of their choice, or deliver only from our quarry, which we manage up near View Hill, Oxford. And the decision to go with the one that we have was the most financially viable one. Yeah. Gravel.
The gravel extraction question. So Environment Canterbury is one of the few councils in New Zealand that has enabled itself through its regional plan to have a permitted activity under certain circumstances and subject to environmental codes of practice for gravel extraction. So we have a really enabling regulatory framework in that sense. And last year, the council adopted an updated gravel management strategy, which puts some structure around that. So if people want to take gravel in Kaikoura or various places, there's a really easy permissions pathway. It does get tripped up if it's a salmon spawning site and a few other quirks that we hope to have a conversation around in the future. But largely, we have a large amount of gravel that's currently coming out of our rivers, and most of it is permitted.
Andrew?
On the floodgates, I'm presuming the two new ones will be powered with Wi-Fi electricity? No, manual. So that's good. And so when there's a disaster, you've got a couple of people there, maybe the one guy's on holiday and the other, so just, with all these human error things.
Nick?
Thanks for the presentation, guys. Just keen to see a general statement, I guess. Keen to see the implementation of our Braided River strategy coming through. Making room for the river, less hard engineering, managed retreat. Sure, we need to protect towns and bridges, but just like people living in Westport or Woodend or South Shore, we've got greater climate risk, and we don't need to protect. We need to stick to that strategy. And it's good to see that there's an example there where on the North Branch of the Hash.
Do you? I think it might be just useful just to say how the Braided River strategy potentially feeds into the work, maybe. So
we have a 100-year strategy, Braided River Revival, Whakahamanu na Awa Apakahi, which was also adopted by Council last year. So through, I guess, a series of operational changes over the last 10 years, we now have a natural infrastructure team, a dedicated space within our engineering department that looks at soft solutions, enhancement of wetlands. They do a huge amount of weed clearance, bird work, various other things. So they're normally tagged along with our hard infrastructure team to ensure fish passage and other opportunities are enabled. We have been successful with central government in what was called berm transition through some previous co-investment work, which enabled the installation of hundreds of thousands of native plants, which are now self-seeding throughout many of our rivers. So it's something that is just now part of our business as usual. It's been a few trials in the field with totara and other species and erosion bays, which is not something that we would have done in the past, but it's good to try. Retreat of stop banks is key to Canterbury's future. That is $1 billion conversation. We looked at that one site in Ashburton that is several $1 million plus for one little piece of one little river. So we're doing what we can with what we can, but if we're going to do a substantial shift for some of our rivers where the stop banks are too close, we would need substantial funding over several decades.
Thank you. And I guess the opportunity is all the more important to make sure people aren't encroaching into our rivers, because once they're there and it becomes part of the farm, we can't afford to buy them out. So we've got to, for everyone's good, keeping our rates down. We have to hold the line of this is the Braid Plain and all that contentious stuff.
Sarah?
Yes, I totally agree with Nick there. It is a problem. I did a farm environment plan where, a dairy farm was just going straight down to Selwyn River, and then they were turning around and asking for a groin. And it's sort of like, where's it going to stop? Anyway, so I'm just back to a page tranche 1, which with the Stop Bank, that's a great program. I've been involved with getting willow removal, and I know it's a huge job. And so with the setting up of the stop banks, there would be quite a removal of shade on that stream. So is there any program for replanting with native trees to shade the water? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The focus of the tree removal has been on really focused on the trees on the stop bank itself rather than the waterway. There are locations where those two become blended, and there are also, of course, locations. I'm thinking of the Otakokino Creek, where the willows that were shading the waterway were completely shading the waterway right over it. So they've been thinned back and pulled back. But always the intention is to leave vegetation along the edges to achieve that shading effect that you're referring to.
Ian, did you have something? Sorry.
Well, I just
come back to you.
I just wanted to say that the biggest impact on the natural form of our braided rivers in Canterbury is invasive exotic weeds, willow, old man's beard, blackberry, gorse, and other weeds. It's not encroachment, although that is a minor problem, and it's not the form of our stop banks, which is a problem in certain areas. But the single biggest factor that we have to address if you want to have revival of braided rivers is the exotic weed problem.
And we'll go back to you, Sarah, and then we'll go to Scotty.
Yes, and I agree with Ian. And then with the removal of the willows in these streams, is there any chance that we could sort of monitor if there's a difference in stream flow? Because the willows take up a lot of the water. So, yeah, especially if it's on a braided river or a braided stream, whether that could be done.
it's certainly something that could be picked up. We don't have a program specifically to look at that, but there are sites where we have a downstream monitoring and where willow removals there, and that's something that can be done quite easily.
Scotty, is this a sermon or a question?
Sermon. Look, I think first, well done for what you're doing, because you give certainty to the projects that we've undertaken, and I think that the audit process that we can run through and give surety to the government that these things are working is one of the things that we keep getting funding for. So well done on that. I do have some concerns though in terms of the south, which it'll be coming more and more to the front of my conversations about what I think. I mean, at our river rating meeting, we talked about the issues that we have down there in terms of return periods. And I've heard you talk about Ashley today about a 1 to 200 to 1 to 500 return period. We've got rivers down, and we don't have to go into the detail about that, but I think some of the better river resilience might be 1 in 200, and we're down to 1 in 10 years on rivers. And we've got, in Ian McKenzie's words, we've got 3 really critical communities down there that are at risk, one being Geraldine, one being Temuka, and the other one being the Pleasant Point community. So that's like the basis of what I'm about to say, but because this is about resilience and it's about increasing resilience, and it's in the government's, it's in their and the road, because of the Rundle Bridge. I think that the main road and the rail, I think there are issues also. My question is this: it's more about my concern about risk, and we're starting to see underwriters withdraw from areas where there is a higher risk. And so my question is, and maybe Stephanie can jump in here, she's probably had more to do with what's going on in the North Island, but it's about, once we set a standard like a 1 in 200 and we get an event in a 1 in 50, do we then attract underwriter nervousness about having insurance in those areas? Because we know the thing that will happen is once the insurers go, then that opportunity to do anything goes, because that rating ability goes. So I guess that's a strategic look at what may happen. Have we got any idea at all? And if you don't know, Lee, then that's fine. We can possibly push into this. But I think that that's becoming evident. There's been a couple of events lately where not the underwriters, the insurers themselves have actually backed it and said, look, I think Westport's one, isn't it? Is that Westport, right, Matt?
Yes.
So I'm just wondering where we sit in that space. Is that relevant for here, Dion? If it's not,
yeah, it is relevant,
on the head,
and it's very relevant for the tranche 3 work and then the ongoing work. I think maybe pick that question up in the tranche 3 potentially. I don't know, but what I might do is share a letter that Darren Ponta, the Greater Wellington Regional Council Chair, who I've delegated the Beyond the Deluge work for through the regional sector. We sent a letter to the Insurance Council. The Insurance Council sent a letter to us. We asked them to do that for evidence for the tranche 3 work, because it is intricately linked, the work that needs to be done with insurance, and making sure that we have a clear pipeline that's not just in a fund like Kānoa, but actually on permanent budgets within the government that we can then partner to make the work happen. So that work is going on. I don't know if there's anything. I think Ian wanted to say something as well.
Happy for Lee to answer it, but there are several components to what you said. So first is that Beyond the Deluge clearly identified that we needed to, where there are significant assets to be protected, you need to lift that level of protection to 1 in 200. And we, in the last triennium, we discussed that with the Insurance Council, who came in to a council meeting, to a workshop, and said that at 1 in 200 year level of protection, we have no insurance concern. So the second part of our strategic approach to this is that all our river liaison committees, and you've sat on quite a lot of those, we identify the level of assets protected by a particular scheme and then the risk sitting there. So that gives us a clear priority as to where we need to invest. And South Canterbury's in the firing line because it's got a relatively low level of protection and a relatively high level of assets behind Rangiora, well, it's Christchurch, Ashburton, then Rangiora, and then, well, Waimak, I should say, not just Rangiora, and then South Canterbury. So we are, the strategic approach with a within our 30 years investment strategy is around South Canterbury now. It's the next cab off the rank.
And then there's one other thing that we need to be thinking about in the back of our minds when we're doing this work is the class action that's going on with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council and soon to be potentially the Hawke's Bay Regional Council in relation to flooding and failures of different infrastructures. That needs to be in the back of our mind when we're thinking about the work programs that we do, and that we do need to keep an eye on that, and that's another conversation for another time. But was there anything else that you wanted to add into that, Lee, or anybody up there?
I'll just make a couple of comments. The Insurance Council of New Zealand is really interested in the national project that we have managed to get funded through Tranche 2 that is going to collate a whole bunch of risk information and create a national pipeline. There's also an element to this where it's not all about infrastructure as well. So in terms of retreat and people going in the right place and, land use planning as we go through reforms is critically important. South Canterbury Rivers in general, a lot of their budget barely covers maintenance. It's always been a bit of an issue. So there is some things down there that we critically need to look at. In the short term, we are doing a focus with our civil defence team, which is something that also fell out of Cyclone Gabrielle around evacuation planning. So we had on the ground with the Timaru District Council in January looking at how they would evacuate people out of Temuka. And when they're cut off in multiple directions, it's a complicated one, but it's a good piece of work to be doing. And I'm not saying that to worry the community, but in the short term, we're looking at all the tools in the toolbox.
That's great. I think both comments from Ian and also from yourself and Dion, I don't think it is a bad thing that we've got low resilience, but we've got a better opportunity, I think, because we're not putting capital on capital on capital. We can actually make the better decision. And After the Deluge was about resilience. It wasn't about building the stop banks high. It was about other flow paths and those sorts of things. So I see that as an opportunity for us down there.
Who have I got on the list now? Megan.
Kia ora. I just have one process question and then a comment. So as I was working my way through this, I was thinking, well, how are mana whenua engaged? And you made it really clear what happens out with the Rakahuri. And in particular, I was thinking about the Waitarakiao and that being quite a culturally significant area. Are mana whenua engaged in all of these projects?
Yes, they are. In the Waitarako case, we also adopted in the last couple of years a Waitarako strategy, which has a steering group, which mana whenua have a seat at the table at that. They are engaged in terms of doing a blessing at some sites in terms of where it's of significance to them. They are co-writing some of our consent applications, which is new territory for us, but it's working out really, really well. And they are consulted on the projects as much as they want to be, noting some of them they're more interested in than others.
That's really helpful. And then the only comment I have, which is I'll just take the opportunity while we're talking about this when we're in this forum, is to encourage everybody to go along to the River Ratings meetings. I have been going along to them, and you learn so much and you hear from the community. But what I find challenging, so it's a little bit of a pre-warning for those of you who haven't been there yet, they can be quite passionate, and I find it really challenging to sit there as a governor and see our staff being interacted with and the public in a particular way. And the staff are excellent professionals and handle it really well, but I'm not the chair of the meeting. The chair of the meeting is actually the River Ratings chairperson. So trying to get that balance right of sitting there as the governor of the team. And I just wanted to take the opportunity and commend your team. And I know I've sent you an email, Lee.
Thank you. Yayan.
Kia ora kōrua. Megan's already taken part of my question. Next one is just on the Rangitata and the South Branch. And then if you just bring that picture up. So, it's interesting that there's flooding there on the actual, infrastructure there on the actual South Branch itself. So the community understands that the South Branch could go any time, and that below, this is above the bridge, this picture. So below the bridge, they also know, down towards the aerodome and other things, that they know that if it does go, their area and infrastructure is in the way, or if they can move it just in time or not. So it's kind of like knowing that a lot of work has gone on to block the South Branch, flooding work so it doesn't come down, but 1 in 150, 1 in 200, who knows, it flows over. So so the community understands, and so probably similar to what Megan said. So when if something did happen, they know that it's going to happen. It might happen.
Yeah, so just to clarify what we're doing and how the existing infrastructure operates up there, there is a series of stop banks down the south side of the main stem of the river. At the bifurcation point where the main stem splits into the South Branch, that stop bank actually is lower in elevation. It doesn't have any topsoil on it. It's just a gravel bank, which is designed to hold water in the South Branch up until around about 1,500 cumecs, which is around about a 1 in 10 year event. Now, of course, that depends on the braid alignment, whether water starts overtopping at that point or not. But the intent is that at around about 1,500 cumecs, water is overtopping, that section of bank will erode and water will flow down, similar to the picture that we're seeing here. So this project is not interfering with that setup. It's not touching that setup at all. This project is just about is containing the overflows from outside of the South Branch once the water gets in there.
Okay, I've got a couple of other questions, but I think they're from people who have asked. What I might do is just get the last slide done, and then we'll go back to those people if that's all right.
So this is a forward-looking slide. So you'll be aware that we have tranche 3 before ministers at the moment for consideration when they see fit, hopefully soon, for some further projects. The Ashti Rakahuri has been put forward, as well as regional structure upgrades. There are a number of other projects, 4 or 5, sitting in behind that, waiting to go as well. But those 2 projects bubble to the surface as Canterbury's 2 top priorities that we said if you were going to do something, yes please, in this space first. We're obviously working on our next 30-year infrastructure strategy, but the key thing I just wanted to also say was we need to get out of this one-off cycle. So by the end of March, we'll have an updated draft business case for permanent co-investment for this type of work going forward, which we will make available to you when that's ready. That would be the ultimate goal.
Thank you. So I'll go back to John Faulkner.
Yeah, I just referring to Councillor Mackenzie's comment in regards to the flood plain within the river reaches themselves in a lot of cases been highly degraded, and I just look at my stretch of the Waiaufa, and I think it would be really good if we were able to get councillors out to one of these degraded stretches and stand there and have a look, because the problem is not simple. It's not just related to flood protection and putting in stop banks, etc., and the insurance. And I know in our zone committee conversations, Mayor Daly acted like Peter Skelton and was thumping the table quite often because that one was not being addressed adequately, and it is a real issue, but it just seems to flow under the bridge because we don't address that adequately. We talk about everything else. We talk about flood protection, we talk about insurance, but we don't talk deeply about one of the primary concerns in some river causes in some rivers is the actual level of gorse and broom and willows and everything. If you went out into the Waia, you'd be disgusted really at the state of it.
I agree. So I'll just touch on, we do have a spray program and mechanical weed clearance program throughout parts of Canterbury. The Wire is interesting as we have a series of piecemeal rating districts through that river, so we don't spray or work everywhere. It's a sitter for a mountains to sea approach, and we don't have the budget to spray everywhere. Probably the place where we've done the most extensive work outside, we spent $1 million in there taking out all sorts of weeds and trees and gorse and broom and willows, and it was amazing to see the natural braid pattern come back and all the natural character flow-ons from that. So I guess I'm just commenting there's biosecurity, biodiversity, flood protection benefits from that work, and we have, 70% of some ridiculous number of all the braided rivers, and that program alone, it's a multi-million-dollar issue.
Add to Lee's answer, and so part of the discussion we're trying to have as a regional council is how do we fund that out of scheme work, and so we have in the Selwyn a small budget for it, and for the region a even smaller budget for the whole of the thing, but it's inadequate, and so we are looking at various options. And one of the discussions we've had with the Huronui District Council is whether we could move to a whole of district rating for that out of scheme work. The trouble is the Huronui District Council's got a very small rating base, and so the amount of money we'd need to raise to be meaningful is quite an impost on the Huronui District ratepayers. So it's not, although we think the answer on paper could sound simple, it's not quite as simple as just doing it. So it's an interesting ongoing discussion.
Nick.
Thank you. So 2 questions. That last bullet point on the last slide, can you expand on that? A draft business case, permanent co-investment. Does that mean central government would give us money on an ongoing basis? Or?
So that's a national business case asking them for a permanent budget line to co-fund flood protection nationally forever, or at least a while.
Wouldn't it be amazing? If you're listening, central government, it's a very good idea. And just in that, in our submission that we signed off yesterday, and that will go to the government for the Simplifying Local Government, talks about the region-wide approach of river resilience. In Canterbury alone, it's $234 billion of assets that the river schemes are protecting. I think you got the number somewhere, $7 billion across, or 7 trillion or something. No, not, I don't know. I think it was in that other thing, but 234 here in Canterbury, $1 billion. It's a lot of money that these flood schemes potentially are holding back from productive assets and everything else. So, I'm just going to go back to
add to the answer on that question, please.
Yes.
If you go back to the discussion we had yesterday with Brad Olsen, and he was talking about the spikes in inflation and in servicing local government spend. If you have governments that have policies which suddenly give money, but there's no consistent... One of the ways we could save money as ratepayers is actually have a consistent program of capital funding from central government, so that you don't have spikes of investment and then dull patches. Where you just
and provide surety to contractors who scale up their jobs to be able to do it. All of that stuff. It's all good. So Andrea, I think you had a question, and then I think we will. Do you have another one after that? Oh, well, I cut in actually. So blame me, Nick, and then I'll go to Andrea, and then we'll close off.
Thank you. So, whether that would be amazing or not, getting lots of money from central government depends on what we're doing with it. If it's business as usual, narrowing up rivers, higher stop banks faster, then this would be bad. But if we are truly going to a 100-year braided river plan, and we're smart and enabling and giving the rivers room for the rivers, then it could be turn to be a good thing. But I'm not, I remain on the fence on that one. So thanks for clarifying that bullet point. And my other second question was, I guess, following on from Megan's one about engagement. How's the engagement with fish and game councils across Canterbury, and And do the two different regions engage more or less, North Canterbury and Central South Island?
I'll just make a general assurance comment. As part of our current work programs, there's no place where we're currently narrowing up rivers. That might have happened 100 years ago, but it's certainly not something that's happening in Canterbury now. In regards to fish and game, we have really good relationships at staff level, field officer level, with both South and North Fish and Game. We have requirements in our code of practice to sit down with them annually and discuss our forward and past work programs. So we have at least an annual meeting with them every year. I'm not actually sure if we've ever had one jointly with both in the same room, but generally they're quite interested in specific rivers. So we do talk to them regularly.
Andrea.
Thank you. And being river people, you guys all know after the Geomorph conference, we are nothing for the energy of these rivers. And part of the whole adaptation thing is educate, like you have to engage with the people. And when Yayan asked that question, like, do the people understand that this is just building the problem further down? So do we have capacity? I know we have some unfilled roles, but do we have capacity to teach the community fluvial science? Because I talked to this guy from Auckland in that conference after their floods. They started teaching the community about flooding because it's going to ease. And as governors, we need to teach the people that retreat is coming. And I see it as our roles as leaders to help teach people. So do we have capacity to get some information out in a nice way?
The short answer is we don't have a dedicated team for that, but we do work quite closely with the flood folk at Auckland Council, and I know post their big events, some of the communication material and videos and bits and pieces that came out were gold, and we're sort of looking at how we could duplicate or reuse those. In terms of the science, it's probably there's other places that can provide that outside our own science team, but it's about being ready to communicate post-flood. We've got a talented staff that can react, but it's not a dedicated work stream within our current work program.
And just on that, Lee, I just want to personally say thank you to yourself and your teams for the supporting some of the regions around the country in the flood response over the last couple of weeks. I've had feedback from a number of the councils around the regions up in the North Island who have said thank you to our staff for the input that they've had. So thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Lee, for your work in that, and pass on our thanks to your teams. And also thanks to you and your team for the response for the shipwreck as well, and for the updates and everything that's been going on there. So we definitely appreciate all of that work.
Thank you.
Ian, can I ask you to please close with karakia?
I'll just say, reiterate thank you to Tim, Sean, Lee, Cliff and the team for the work they do looking after us. Hang on, I'm going to find something here. Yeah. Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga, kia makinikina ki utu, kia mataratara ki tai, ehi aki ana te atakura, hei teo, hei huka, hei hau hu, ti hei Māori ora.